My name is Camille Richardson. I'm 33 years old now, and the moment my life truly changed wasn't the day I left my family's house. It was the moment I realized my family had never seen me as a daughter, only as a bank account. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was sitting in my cramped apartment kitchen, eating leftover noodles and scrolling through emails after work. When I saw the subject line, my heart skipped. Hamilton and Associates. Final offer. My hands actually trembled as I opened it. 6 years. 6 exhausting years of grinding through freelance marketing contracts, living on the cheapest groceries I could find, and juggling hospital bills for my mother's cancer treatments. 6 years of believing if I could just push a little harder, sacrifice a little more, life might finally turn around. And there it was. Senior marketing director. Salary? $250,000 per year. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen. $250,000. It felt unreal. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine a different life. A life where I didn't panic every time the electricity bill arrived. A life where I could walk into a grocery store and buy what I wanted, instead of calculating every dollar in my head. A life where maybe, just maybe, I could breathe. Naturally, the first thing I did was drive to my father's house to tell my family. That was my first mistake. The old house sat at the end of Maple Heights Road, the same place where I'd grown up. Mom had loved that house. She used to grow roses in the front garden. When she got sick, those roses were the only thing that still made her smile. After she died, I kept paying the bills so Dad and my sister could stay there. Electricity, water, insurance, groceries. 5 years of expenses, every single one in my name. I walked into the kitchen with a smile I couldn't contain. Dad, Brittany, you won't believe this. My father looked up from the table, barely interested. What is it? I got the job. My sister Brittany was leaning against the counter, one hand resting on her swollen belly. She was 7 months pregnant. What job? She asked lazily. I held up my phone. Senior marketing director at Hamilton and Associates. Dad frowned. What's the salary? $250,000 a year. For a second, the room went quiet. Then Dad nodded slowly. Good. That was it. Not congratulations. Not pride. Just one word. Then he leaned back in his chair and said something that would change everything. Congratulations, sweetheart. Now you can finally start helping this family the way you should. I blinked. What? He folded his hands calmly. We'll need 50% of your salary to maintain this house. My brain stalled. And 30% for Brittany and the auto shop. I laughed. I genuinely thought he was joking. That's 80% of my income. No excuses, Dad said, as casually as if he were discussing the weather. Dad, after taxes, that's basically my entire paycheck. His expression hardened. You lived here rent-free for 26 years. He pointed toward the living room. We raised you, fed you, put a roof over your head. Then he leaned forward. Now it's time for you to pay it back. Behind him, Brittany smirked. I actually quit my job at the dental office, she said. Her tone was cheerful, almost excited. I knew you'd take care of us. My stomach dropped. You quit your job? She shrugged. Well, obviously, Derek and I need a new Suburban before the baby comes. My Uncle Frank, who had been sitting quietly at the end of the table, finally spoke. And if you refuse, he said calmly, we'll take legal action. I turned toward him. What? We already consulted Attorney Williams downtown. He crossed his arms. You can't abandon your family. The words echoed in my head. They weren't joking. They were extorting me, my own family. Family comes first, Dad said coldly. That night, I packed my car in silence. My Toyota Camry was parked outside under the dim streetlight. Inside the house, the television played loudly, while Brittany laughed at some reality show. No one noticed what I was doing. In my bedroom, I spread 5 years of paperwork across the bed. Electric bills, water bills, insurance payments, grocery receipts, hospital invoices for Mom's chemotherapy treatments, 5 years of proof that I had been carrying this family on my back while they lived comfortably, while they assumed it would never stop. By midnight, the Camry was full. Suitcases, boxes, files. I stood in the doorway of the house for a moment, looking at the dark hallway where Mom used to sit during the evenings. For a second, doubt crept in. Then I remembered the number, 80%. Not help, not support. Ownership. That was the night they stopped being my family, and the night I stopped being their ATM. I drove away without leaving a note. The first week of freedom felt almost unreal. For the first time in years, every dollar I earned belonged to me. I went grocery shopping at Whole Foods and bought organic vegetables without calculating every item. I joined Planet Fitness. I even treated myself to dinner at Olive Garden. Meanwhile, my phone exploded. Text messages from Brittany. Bills are bouncing. Calls from Dad. Call me immediately. Voicemails from Uncle Frank. You ungrateful brat. I ignored everything until the certified letter arrived. The envelope was thick, official. Inside was a court summons. My father had actually sued me. He wanted a judge to force me to financially support the family. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the paperwork, equal parts stunned and furious. The audacity was breathtaking. That was when I decided to hire a lawyer. And that decision would uncover a secret so devastating, it would destroy what little remained of my family. The first time I met attorney Sarah Chun, she studied me the way a surgeon studies an X-ray. Calm, methodical, looking for fractures. Her office sat on the 12th floor of a downtown building overlooking Springfield's financial district. Floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, and shelves packed with legal binders gave the place an atmosphere that felt both elegant and intimidating. Sarah Chun herself was small, composed, and impossibly sharp, the kind of woman who didn't waste words. I handed her the court summons my father had sent. She read it slowly, one eyebrow lifting slightly. "So," she said finally, "your father is suing you for financial neglect." I nodded. "Apparently, I'm legally required to support the family now." She placed the paper down carefully. "Before we talk about strategy," she said, folding her hands, "I need to ask something important." Her eyes locked onto mine. "Do you have documentation proving you've been financially supporting them?" I almost laughed. 5 years worth. Electric bills, water bills, mortgage payments, groceries, insurance, and every hospital invoice from my mother's cancer treatments. Sarah leaned forward slightly. "Good." Her voice sharpened. "Because if we can prove that, this lawsuit collapses immediately." She paused, then added quietly, "I'll also need your mother's medical records and financial documents." "Why?" I asked. "If your father has hidden assets," she said calmly, "we may be able to countersue." That possibility had never even crossed my mind. Hidden assets? My father had spent the past 5 years insisting we were drowning in debt, that Mom's treatments had wiped out everything. That was why I had been working nonstop. Why I skipped meals. Why I spent nights crying over spreadsheets, trying to figure out how to stretch another paycheck. But Sarah's instincts had already begun digging where I hadn't dared to look. That evening, I drove to a storage unit where my mother's old belongings were kept. The place smelled like dust and cardboard. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I opened the first box. Hospital bills, insurance claims, pharmacy receipts, stack after stack of documents. I sat cross-legged on the cold concrete floor, sorting through everything. Hours passed. Then something strange caught my eye. A thin envelope tucked inside an old binder. The handwriting on the front was elegant and delicate. Grandma Rose. My pulse quickened as I unfolded the letter. The paper had yellowed slightly with age, but the words were unmistakable. "My dearest daughter, with this trust fund, I want to secure your future and Camille's. May you never struggle financially during your treatment." Trust fund? My heart started pounding. What trust fund? I read the letter again and again. My grandmother had died years before Mom got sick, but apparently she had left money specifically for cancer treatment. I grabbed my phone immediately. After some searching through old files, I found the name of my grandmother's estate attorney, Harold Peterson. He had retired years ago, but the number still worked. An elderly voice answered after several rings. "Hello? Mr. Peterson?" I said carefully. "My name is Camille Richardson. My grandmother was Rose Richardson." There was a pause. Then the man sighed softly. "Ah, yes, I remember your family." My stomach twisted. I have a question, I said, about a trust fund. Silence stretched across the phone line. Then he said slowly, yes, there was one. My grip tightened around the phone. How much? About $180,000. My heart nearly stopped. $180,000? Yes, he said gently. It was established as a medical trust for your mother's cancer treatment. The words felt surreal. If that money existed, then why had I been paying everything? Who managed the trust? I asked quietly. Another pause. Your father, Mr. Peterson said. He was named trustee. My mouth went dry. Was the money used for my mother's treatment? The silence on the line stretched longer this time, so long that my chest began to tighten. Finally, the old man spoke again. No, dear. The words hit like a hammer. He dissolved the trust 3 days after your mother's funeral. My phone slipped from my hand. It clattered against the concrete floor of the storage unit. For several seconds, I just stared at it, unable to breathe. 3 days. 3 days after Mom died. While I was still drowning in grief, my father had quietly taken $180,000 meant for her treatment and kept it. All those sleepless nights calculating medical bills, all the meals I skipped to afford her medications, all the sacrifices, all the guilt. Mom had died believing we were broke, when the money had been there the entire time. My hands began shaking violently. When I finally managed to stand, my legs felt numb. I gathered every document I could find. Hospital bills, insurance paperwork, the trust letter, everything. The next morning, I brought it all to Sarah Chun. She read through the documents silently. Then she leaned back slowly in her chair. Her eyes were shining with something close to excitement. Camille, she said, this isn't just a family dispute anymore. She tapped the letter from my grandmother. This is embezzlement, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty. My father had committed a federal crime, and the man who had just tried to sue me was about to face far worse consequences. But while I was still trying to process that bombshell, my sister decided to escalate things. 2 weeks later, she found a way to hit me where it would hurt most, my job. It happened on a Monday morning. My boss, Janet Lawson, called me into her office. Her expression was unusually serious. Camille, she said carefully, we need to discuss something. My stomach tightened. What kind of something? She slid a printed email across the desk. Someone contacted HR. I picked it up. A complaint. The accusation made my blood run cold. According to the message, I had stolen proprietary marketing campaigns from a family business and used them to get hired at Hamilton and Associates. My sister had sent it. I recognized the wording instantly. She claims, Janet continued carefully, that you created marketing campaigns while working for an unregistered family company. She folded her hands and then brought those ideas here. My heart pounded. Brittany had done her homework. She had referenced real marketing campaigns from my old freelance portfolio, work I had done years before joining the company, campaigns that existed publicly online. Does this family business exist? Janet asked. I took a slow breath. My father owns Richardson Auto Repair. I looked her straight in the eye. But I never worked there. The tension in the room felt suffocating. I created those campaigns independently as a freelance consultant, I continued. I have every contract and timestamp. The investigation that followed lasted 2 of the most stressful weeks of my life. HR contacted former clients. They checked file creation dates. They examined every detail of my professional history, all because my sister wanted revenge. And during those long, nerve-wracking days, I realized something terrifying. If Brittany succeeded, she wouldn't just ruin my career. She would prove that my family wasn't done destroying my life. Not even close. The HR investigation lasted exactly 14 days. 14 days where every morning I walked into Hamilton and Associates wondering if it would be my last. 14 days where every email notification made my heart spike. 14 days where my entire career hung on the lies of one desperate woman. My sister. On the 15th morning, I was called into the HR office again. The room felt colder than usual. Tom Alvarez, the HR director, sat behind the desk with a stack of documents. My boss, Janet Lawson, stood near the window. Neither of them looked angry, but neither of them looked relaxed either. Camille, Tom said, gesturing toward the chair. Please sit. My pulse hammered in my ears as I lowered myself into the seat. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Tom opened the file. We completed the investigation. My throat tightened. We contacted every client listed in your freelance portfolio, he continued. Verified contracts, payment records, timestamps on campaign files. He looked up. And we also spoke with your sister. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Tom exhaled through his nose, shaking his head slightly. When we requested employment contracts proving you worked for the supposed family business, he paused. She hung up. Janet crossed her arms. Then she called back 5 minutes later, pretending to be a witness. Tom's mouth twitched slightly. From the same phone number. Relief crashed through me so hard I almost laughed. The tension drained from my shoulders in a single wave. Tom closed the file. All your campaigns were verified, he said. The copyrights have been registered in your name since before this alleged family company even existed. Janet finally smiled. Case closed. For months of tension, years of stress, all of it seemed to release at once. But then Janet leaned forward slightly. And actually, there's something else. I blinked. What? She slid another document across the desk. We're off. I stared at her. What? Tom nodded. Janet added with a grin. Ironically, the campaigns your sister claimed you stole are exactly what convinced us to hire you in the first place. The raise came at the perfect time, while my family tried to destroy me. My career was rising faster than ever. But the universe wasn't finished revealing their secrets. 2 weeks later, another discovery landed in my lap. This one, I was reviewing property records for my attorney when something caught my eye. A mortgage. Filed 18 months earlier. Again, my heart sank. Mom had bought that house with her inheritance. It was supposed to be paid off completely, yet the document was clear. My father had secretly taken out a $120,000 loan against it. Predatory interest rates. Crushing repayment terms. Suddenly, the puzzle pieces snapped together. His desperation. The 80% demand. The lawsuit. It wasn't just greed. Richardson Auto Repair was collapsing. He had mortgaged the house to save the business. And when that failed, he had tried to turn my salary into his last lifeline, his Hail Mary. But the gamble had already failed. The loan was in default. Foreclosure proceedings had already begun. My childhood home was heading toward auction. That night, I sat in my new downtown apartment with a glass of wine, staring out over the city lights, and something inside me shifted. For years, I had been trying to save my family. Now I realized something simple. I didn't have to. For the first time in my life, I held the power. My phone rang. Unknown number, I answered. Camille, my father's voice said immediately. We need to talk. My chest tightened slightly. It's about the house, he continued. We have nothing to discuss. Please, he said. His voice sounded older, smaller. It's all we have left. It's where your mother was happy. The words almost worked. Almost. But then I remembered the trust fund, the lies, the lawsuit. Mom was happy there, I said quietly. Until you turned it into a financial tomb. Silence filled the line. Then his voice cracked slightly. What do you want? Money? An apology? Just tell me what to do. For years, I would have begged for this moment. Now it meant nothing. Nothing, I said. You have nothing I want anymore. And I hung up. The next weeks moved fast. Attorney Chun filed the countersuit for embezzlement and fraud. The evidence was overwhelming. The stolen trust fund, the mortgage fraud, the harassment. Within 2 days, the judge approved a restraining order. My father and Brittany were now legally forbidden from contacting me. Every call, every message, every attempt automatically became evidence against them. At work, things were exploding in the opposite direction. Janet called me into her office again. The board reviewed your performance, she said. We want you leading the new digital marketing division. Another promotion. Another leap forward, but my family wasn't done yet. One evening, I walked into the parking garage under my building and stopped. My Honda Accord looked like it had survived a riot. Across the hood, sprayed in bright red paint, were 2 words: ungrateful daughter. All 4 tires were slashed. No cameras, no witnesses, but I knew exactly who had done it. Unfortunately, that wasn't even the worst part. Because the vandalism made me 3 hours late for the most important client presentation of the year, our biggest account, Davidson Industries, $1 million contract. Mr. Davidson sat at the conference table, arms crossed, expression icy. "This makes us question your professionalism," he said coldly. I spent the next hour fighting to save the deal and barely succeeded. Meanwhile, my family's situation was deteriorating at incredible speed. Through public business records, I watched it happen. Richardson Auto Repair lost their biggest client, Springfield Construction. A delivery mistake cost them $25,000 in penalties. Then came the public humiliation. My sister launched a GoFundMe campaign. The title read, "Help Family in Medical Crisis. Abandoned by Ungrateful Daughter." The entire story was fiction. Fake illnesses. Fake emergencies, fake accusations against me. 3 weeks later, the campaign had raised $23. The comment section was brutal. Why isn't the daughter helping? Something feels off about this story. Where are the hospital records? Desperation pushed Brittany even further. One afternoon, she appeared outside my office building, screaming in the parking lot. "You're a monster," she yelled. "Dad is sick. We're losing Mom's house because of you." Employees watched through the windows. I calmly took out my phone and began recording. Then I called the police. Officer Martinez arrived 10 minutes later. "Ma'am," he told Brittany firmly, "there's a restraining order in place." Her face went pale. "Next time," he added, "it's automatic arrest." But my sister wasn't finished. Not even close. Because the next attack she launched would destroy the one relationship in my life that still mattered. The attack that destroyed my personal life arrived on an ordinary Thursday afternoon. I was reviewing campaign analytics when my phone began vibrating nonstop on my desk. At first, I ignored it. Deadlines were approaching, and after everything that had happened, I had trained myself not to react to every unexpected notification. But the screen kept lighting up, call after call. Finally, I picked it up. Tyler. My boyfriend. The moment I answered, his voice exploded through the speaker. Who the hell is she? My stomach tightened instantly. "Tyler, what are you talking about? What are you hiding from me?" he demanded. His voice sounded furious and hurt. I sat up straighter. "Tyler, slow down. What happened?" "The photos," he snapped. "What photos?" A second later, my phone chimed. A message from him. I opened it, and the world seemed to tilt sideways. The images looked real, painfully real. They showed me inside my apartment, arms wrapped around a blonde woman, kissing her, laughing with her. The woman was wearing one of my sweaters. Standing in my living room. If I hadn't known better, I would have believed them myself. They were flawless. Professional lighting, perfect angles, a flawless deep fake. "Tyler," I said carefully, trying to keep my voice steady. "Those are fake." "Yeah, right," he snapped. "Someone is sabotaging me," I said. "You know what my family has been doing." Silence. Then his voice came back colder than before. "That's the classic excuse, Camille." "Tyler," but he had already hung up. I tried calling him back. Blocked. Just like that, 6 months of my relationship disappeared. A few minutes later, another message arrived from an anonymous number. The text was short. "Thought you should know what kind of person your girlfriend really is. A concerned friend." I didn't need a signature. The tone alone was unmistakable. "Brittany." My sister had crossed another line, and this time she had taken something that couldn't be replaced. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to cry. But when the tears stopped, something else replaced them. Clarity. The war with my family was ending sooner than they realized, because the foreclosure notice arrived the following week. A gray December morning. Attorney Chun forwarded the document with a brief message. "Auction scheduled. February 15th. I stared at the notice for a long time. Then I opened a new file on my laptop. Within an hour, the paperwork was complete. The company was registered the same afternoon. Phoenix Property Solutions, LLC. The name felt appropriate. A rebirth. Rising from ashes. Over the next 2 months, I quietly moved money into the company account. 5 years of sacrifices. My promotions. A bank loan approved thanks to my $265,000 salary. By the time the paperwork cleared, the LLC held $160,000. More than enough. Because the mortgage balance on the house was only $135,000. Meanwhile, my family's collapse accelerated. Both of their cars were repossessed. A neighbor posted photos in the Maple Heights Facebook group. Anyone know why the Richardson cars were towed? The comments spread like wildfire. Soon the entire neighborhood knew they were bankrupt. Brittany made one last attempt to reach me. It was close to midnight when the doorman at my apartment building called upstairs. "There's a woman here claiming to be your sister," he said. "She's pregnant and asking to speak with you." I walked to the window. Down below, standing in the rain under the streetlights, was Brittany, her hair soaked, her hands wrapped around her stomach. For a brief moment, pity flickered inside me. Then I remembered the photos, the lies, the years of manipulation. "I don't have a sister," I told the doorman quietly. "Please escort that person off the property." From the window, I watched as security guided her away. She disappeared into the storm. And with her went the last fragile thread of sympathy I still felt. The auction day arrived with freezing rain and bitter wind. Perfect weather for justice. I parked across the street from the courthouse. Through the windshield, I watched my father and Brittany standing near the entrance. They looked like mourners at their own funeral. Soaked. Silent. Defeated. The auction itself lasted exactly 11 minutes. Several bidders dropped out early when the price climbed. Then Phoenix Property Solutions LLC entered the final bid, $155,000. $20,000 over the mortgage. The gavel came down, and just like that, the house was mine. I watched my father's face crumble from across the street. Attorney Chun called me seconds later. "The property now belongs to Phoenix Property Solutions," she said calmly. "Proceed when ready." 3 days later, the eviction notice was delivered. My phone exploded with calls. I answered one. Brittany's voice was hysterical. "How could you do this? It's Mom's house." "You sued me," I replied calmly. "You harassed me. You tried to destroy my career and my relationship." Silence. "I have nothing to do with your problems," I finished. "Figure them out yourselves." Eviction day became a neighborhood spectacle. People stood outside with umbrellas and coffee mugs, watching, whispering. When I arrived in my black Lexus, the crowd fell silent. My father noticed me first. His eyes widened in disbelief. "You came to gloat?" he said hoarsely. Brittany rushed forward, huge with pregnancy, panicked. "Look what you've done," she cried. "We've lost everything." I raised a hand, stopping her without touching her. The silence that followed was heavier than shouting. Then my father collapsed to his knees in the mud. "Please," he sobbed. "We are family. Your mother wouldn't have wanted this." For a moment, the entire street held its breath. I walked past them to the front door. The key gleamed in my hand. The lock clicked loudly as I turned it. Then I faced the crowd. "I am Phoenix Property Solutions, LLC," I said clearly. When my family demanded 80% of my future, I decided to reclaim the past. Brittany tried to protest. I raised my voice. "Let's talk about injustice." I pulled out the envelope. The $180,000 cancer trust fund my father stole from his dying wife. Gasps rippled through the neighbors. Old Mr. Rodriguez stepped forward, stunned. "Maria's treatment money?" "Yes," I said. "My mother died believing we were broke." I pointed toward my father, while he had $180,000 hidden away. Brittany collapsed into tears. Her husband slowly backed away. The crowd murmured in disbelief. Mr. Rodriguez looked at my father with disgust. Maria was like a sister to me, he said quietly. How could you? I dropped another envelope at my father's feet. I paid the rest of Mom's medical debts, I said. With what remained, I created the Maria Richardson Cancer Research Fund. Silence fell over the street. That was the last time I saw them. Months later, the house had been completely renovated. Not for me. For a young couple named the Johnsons with twin toddlers. They rented it at below market price. Sometimes when I drive past, I see the children playing in the garden where Mom once grew roses. And I know the house finally belongs to people who deserve it. The last time I saw my father and Brittany was in a discount grocery store. They looked older, gray, defeated. They quickly turned into another aisle to avoid me. I felt nothing. No anger, no triumph. Only quiet peace. Now I sit in my penthouse apartment overlooking the city lights. Revenge didn't bring explosive joy, but it brought something better. Closure. I didn't get my family back. I built something stronger instead. A life. Was it worth it? Every single penny. My name is Lauren Davis. I'm 34 years old, and the day my parents decided my son's life was worth less than my sister's legal problems was the day I finally understood something people rarely admit out loud. Sometimes the people who share your blood are the ones most willing to bleed you dry. 3 months ago, my life was quiet. Exhausting, yes, but stable in the fragile way life can be when you're raising a sick child alone. I was sitting in my small living room in Portland, Oregon, grading essays for my 10th grade English class, while my 8-year-old son Noah worked on his math homework at the coffee table. His tongue stuck out slightly as he concentrated, pencil tapping against the page. That small, absent-minded gesture had become one of my favorite things in the world, because for months before that, Noah hadn't had the strength to sit up long enough to do homework. Cancer has a way of turning ordinary moments into miracles. Mom, Noah said suddenly, glancing up, is 9 times 8 72 or 82? 72, I replied without looking up from the paper I was marking. He grinned proudly and scribbled the answer down. Then my phone rang. The caller ID flashed one word, Mom. I almost didn't answer. My relationship with my parents had always been complicated. Not explosive, not openly hostile, just uneven. But something in my chest tightened anyway as I picked up. Hello? Lauren, my mother said immediately. Her voice sounded tense, urgent. You need to come home right now. I sat up straighter. What's wrong? Is Dad okay? There was a pause. Then she said something that should have been my first warning. Just come and bring your checkbook. A cold feeling slid through my stomach. Still, I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe someone needed help. Maybe something serious had happened. My parents lived in Salem, about 3 hours away. I packed an overnight bag, asked my neighbor Grace to keep an eye on the house, and drove through the gray Oregon rain while Noah slept in the back seat. By the time we reached my childhood home, the sky had already turned dark. The house looked exactly the same as it had when I was a teenager. White siding, green shutters, the maple tree in the front yard where Amber and I used to hang a tire swing. For a moment, nostalgia softened the tension in my chest. Then I walked inside, and everything changed. My parents were sitting at the dining table. So was my younger sister, Amber. And beside her sat a man in an expensive navy suit with a leather briefcase resting beside his chair. The moment I stepped into the room, all conversation stopped. Lauren, my mother said quickly, you're here. No one looked relieved. They looked expectant. Who's this? I asked cautiously, nodding toward the stranger. The man stood immediately, offering his hand. Robert Sterling, he said smoothly. I'm your sister's attorney. My stomach dropped. Attorney for what? Amber didn't look up. She sat slouched in her chair, staring at her manicured nails as if the entire situation bored her. Mom cleared her throat. Amber's been accused of something she didn't do. What kind of accusation? Assault, Robert said calmly. And stalking. The words echoed through the dining room like something unreal. Excuse me? It's all a misunderstanding, my father added quickly. But the woman pressing charges has money and connections. Robert folded his hands neatly. If we want to protect Amber properly, we'll need a strong legal defense. And that costs money. A bad feeling curled tighter in my chest. How much? My mother inhaled. $60,000. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. $60,000. Robert nodded. The other party has considerable resources. We need to match them. My father leaned forward. We've already refinanced the house. My head snapped toward him. You what? We had to, he said defensively. Legal situations like this escalate quickly. And we've maxed out our credit cards, Mom added. Then she looked directly at me. You're our last option. I stared at them. The room suddenly felt smaller. You refinanced the house? Without telling me? We didn't want to worry you, Mom said. But now we need your help. Amber finally looked up. Her green eyes were cold. Family helps family. Something in my chest cracked. I don't have $60,000 lying around. Amber scoffed. Don't lie. My pulse spiked. What? I know about your savings account, she said. The one you've been building for years. A chill slid down my spine. How do you know about that? She shrugged lazily. I have my ways. I clinked. That money isn't for you. Robert tilted his head. What is it for? It's for Noah's treatment. The room went silent. Who's my son? He has acute lymphoblastic leukemia. For the first time since I arrived, Amber actually looked surprised. There's an experimental treatment program at Johns Hopkins. Insurance won't cover it. I forced myself to meet my parents' eyes. That savings account is the only way I can pay for it. For a moment, no one spoke. Then my mother sighed. Oh, Lauren. The sympathy in her voice felt rehearsed. I'm sure Noah will be fine. My heart started pounding. But Amber could go to prison. I blinked. Prison? Mom nodded. Is that what you want for your sister? I stood slowly. What I want is for my son to live. My father shook his head in irritation. You're being dramatic. Kids bounce back from these things. Amber's future is on the line. The chair scraped loudly against the hardwood as I stood. Are you seriously telling me my child's life is less important than Amber avoiding consequences for her actions? She's innocent, Mom shouted. Is she? I looked directly at Amber. Because last time I checked, innocent people don't need $60,000 lawyers. Amber stood abruptly. You've always been jealous of me. My jaw tightened. Jealous of what? Your 4 failed relationships? Your 6 maxed out credit cards? The fact Mom and Dad have been rescuing you since you were 17? Her face twisted with rage. At least I didn't get pregnant in college and drop out. At least I take responsibility for my choices. Robert cleared his throat awkwardly. Perhaps we should discuss this rationally. There's nothing to discuss, I said. I grabbed my purse. I'm not giving you a cent. Mom rushed toward me and grabbed my arm. Lauren, please. We're begging you. I gently pulled free. No. And don't call me again until you're ready to apologize for even asking. As I walked toward the door, Amber's voice followed me. Low. Sharp. You'll regret this. I didn't stop walking. But something about the way she said it sent a cold shiver down my spine. Because in that moment, I still believed the worst thing my family could do was ask. I had no idea they were about to do something far worse. They were about to take me to court. 2 weeks after that dinner in Salem, I was sitting beside Noah at Oregon Health and Science University, while a clear plastic bag of chemotherapy drugs slowly dripped into his IV line. Hospitals have a smell that never really leaves you once you've spent enough time inside them. Antiseptic, plastic, the faint bitterness of medicine. Noah lay in the reclining chair next to me, wrapped in the blue fleece blanket he insisted on bringing to every appointment. His hair had thinned to soft patches across his scalp, but he still tried to smile whenever the nurses came in. Mom, he said quietly, staring at the ceiling, can we watch that Minecraft video again? Of course, I said softly. I pulled up the video on my phone and propped it on the tray table in front of him. Then my phone buzzed. An unknown number. Normally I ignored those, but something made me answer. Hello? Miss Lauren Davis? The voice was firm and official. Yes? This is Officer Thompson with the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office. My stomach tightened. You've been served. Please check your front door for the summons. I blinked. Served for what? I'm not at liberty to discuss the details, ma'am. Have a good day. The line clicked dead. For a long moment, I just stared at the phone. Mom? Noah said softly. You look weird. I forced a smile. Just a work call, baby. But my hands were shaking. I called my neighbor Grace, who lived 2 houses down and had been helping watch the house whenever I stayed overnight at the hospital. Grace, I said quickly when she answered. Can you check my front door? Sure, honey. Why? I think someone left something there. A moment later, she spoke again. There's an envelope taped to your door. My chest tightened. What kind of envelope? Legal looking. My stomach dropped. That night, after Noah finally fell asleep at home, I walked to the front door and peeled the envelope from the wood. Inside was a court summons. My parents were suing me. I read the first page 3 times before the words made sense. Financial elder abuse. They claimed I had deliberately withheld financial support, despite having the means to help them. I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath my feet. The next morning, I sat in a cramped office between a Thai restaurant and a dry cleaner in downtown Portland. Across from me sat David Martinez, the only lawyer I could realistically afford on a teacher's salary. He read through the documents slowly. Then he leaned back in his chair and rubbed his chin. They're claiming financial elder abuse, he said. I let out a hollow laugh. They're 56 and 58. David raised an eyebrow. Not exactly elderly. No. And this sister of yours, he continued, the one they want legal money for? Amber. What's she accused of? Assault and stalking. Serious charges. He glanced up. Has she been arrested? Not yet. That's why they want the lawyer. David tapped the papers thoughtfully. In my experience, he said slowly, when families sue each other for money, there's usually a deeper story. He looked at me carefully. Tell me about your relationship with them. So I did. I told him about growing up as the responsible daughter, the one who studied, the one who worked part-time jobs, the one who paid her own way through Portland State University. While Amber dropped out of 3 colleges. Amber maxed out credit cards. Amber always had some crisis my parents rushed to solve. They missed my college graduation, I said quietly. Amber had a breakup that week. David winced. They forgot Noah's birthday 2 years in a row, I continued. But they've never missed one of Amber's parties. And now, he said, they want you to sacrifice your son's treatment fund. Yes. David nodded slowly. We'll fight this. Then he sighed. But I should warn you, family court can get ugly. He wasn't kidding. The first hearing took place a month later in the Multnomah County Courthouse. When I walked into the courtroom, my stomach sank. My parents were there. Amber too. But they hadn't come alone. My Aunt Crystal, Uncle Blake, and several cousins filled the gallery seats behind them. It looked like a twisted family reunion. Quite the audience, David murmured beside me. Across the room stood my parents' attorney, Victoria Hayes, sharp suit, sharp eyes, sharp smile. The kind of lawyer who enjoyed tearing people apart politely. When the hearing began, she stood confidently before the judge. Your Honor, she said smoothly, my clients have been abandoned by their daughter, despite years of financial and emotional support. I stared at the table. She has the means to help them, Victoria continued, yet refuses. Then she turned slightly toward me. Miss Davis owns her home outright, does she not? Objection, David said calmly. Relevance. It speaks to the defendant's financial position. Judge Patricia Morgan, a stern woman with silver hair and steel eyes, adjusted her glasses. I'll allow it. Victoria smiled slightly. She also drives a BMW. I clenched my fists. It was a 10-year-old used car I'd bought after my divorce, but David had warned me not to interrupt. So I stayed silent. When it was our turn, David stood. Your Honor, my client's son is currently undergoing treatment for acute lymphoblastic leukemia. He handed over a folder. These are his medical records, treatment plans, and the projected costs of an experimental protocol at Johns Hopkins. The courtroom grew quiet. Every dollar in her savings account represents hope for that child's survival. Victoria stood immediately. Allegedly. David frowned. We haven't seen proof of this savings account, she continued. Judge Morgan looked directly at me. Miss Davis, my throat tightened. Are you willing to provide bank statements? David spoke quickly. Your Honor, that would be a serious invasion of my client's privacy. It would also settle the matter of whether these funds exist. The courtroom seemed to close in around me. If I refused, I would look guilty. If I agreed, they would know exactly how much money I had. I took a breath. I'll provide them. That night, Noah was too sick to eat the soup I'd made. I knelt beside the bathroom floor, holding his hair as he threw up. When he finished, he looked up at me with tired eyes. Mom? Yes, baby. Am I going to die? The question felt like a knife sliding into my chest. No, I whispered. No, sweetheart. We're going to get you to Johns Hopkins. You're going to get better. He studied my face carefully. Promise? My voice trembled. I promise. But as I tucked him into bed later that night, I wondered if that promise was about to be taken away from me. Because if my parents succeeded in court, Noah might lose the one chance he had to survive. And the worst part? The second hearing was already approaching, and this time, they had my bank statements. The second hearing was worse. That was the first thing I thought when I stepped back into the courtroom and saw the stack of papers in front of Victoria Hayes. My bank statements. Months of careful saving reduced to highlighted lines and balances on white paper. Numbers stripped of context. Hope translated into evidence. I had barely slept the night before. Noah had run a fever, and I'd spent half the night sitting beside his bed, pressing cool cloths to his forehead while trying not to imagine courtrooms, judges, or the possibility that one signature from the wrong person could rip away the future I was fighting to build for him. By the time morning came, my nerves were pulled so tight they felt like glass. Amber, on the other hand, looked perfectly composed. She sat beside my parents in a pale cream blouse, her hair blown out in glossy waves, her expression calm in the way only truly entitled people can look calm when someone else is paying the price for their choices. Mom reached for Amber's hand like she was the victim in all this. Dad wouldn't look at me. That hurt more than I wanted to admit. Not because I still expected him to defend me, but because some childish part of me, some buried, pathetic part, had still hoped that at some point he would look around that room, see his daughter being dragged into court while her son fought cancer, and finally say, "Enough, this has gone too far." He never did. When the hearing began, Victoria stood and adjusted her jacket with that same polished confidence. "Your Honor," she said, "we now have the defendant's financial records." She lifted the file slightly. "These statements show that Miss Davis has $85,000 in savings." I felt every head in the room turn toward me. Victoria continued, "That is more than enough to provide meaningful assistance to her family while still preserving resources for future discretionary expenses." Discretionary. I nearly laughed out loud, as if a child's cancer treatment were a vacation fund, as if flights, hospital stays, specialist consultations, medications, temporary housing, and the unbearable cost of trying to keep your child alive could be reduced to the phrase, future discretionary expenses. David rose. "Your Honor, counsel is deliberately mischaracterizing the purpose of those funds." Victoria ignored him. She has chosen not to help her parents despite their financial distress. Meanwhile, my clients have already refinanced their home and taken on debt for their younger daughter's legal defense. I couldn't stop myself. That's not true. David's hand touched my arm, warning me, but I was already standing. "The treatment costs $140,000, I said, my voice shaking. "That doesn't include travel or accommodation in Baltimore. I'm still saving. I'm not hoarding money. I'm trying to keep my son alive." Judge Morgan's expression hardened. "Sit down, Miss Davis." But then not a wide smile, not obvious, and something inside me snapped. "You want to know why Amber really needs a lawyer?" I said. The words came out before I could stop them. "Ask her about Sarah Mitchell." Amber's expression changed instantly, sharp, alert. "Ask her about the restraining order," I continued. "Ask her what really happened." "That's enough." Judge Morgan's gavel struck so hard, the sound rang through the room. "Mr. Martinez, control your client or I will hold her in contempt." David stood and placed a steadying hand on my shoulder. "Sit down," he murmured under his breath. I sat. But but the silence that followed felt different, more charged. Victoria recovered first. Your Honor, the defendant is making irrelevant and inflammatory allegations. Then perhaps, Judge Morgan said coolly, counsel should focus on the legal matter before this court. A recess was called 10 minutes later. The moment I stepped into the hallway, my knees felt weak. The courthouse corridor smelled faintly like old paper and coffee. Lawyers passed in quick, clipped strides. A bailiff laughed softly with a clerk near the elevators. Somewhere down the hall, someone was crying. David turned to me, lowering his voice. That was risky. I know. You can't just throw accusations into open court without support. I know, I repeated, more quietly this time. He studied my face. But I swallowed. But Amber looked scared when I said Sarah's name. Before he could answer, a woman's voice spoke behind us. Are you Lauren Davis? I turned. The woman standing there looked about my age, maybe a little older. She had auburn hair pulled into a low ponytail and nervous eyes that kept flicking toward the courtroom doors, as if she was afraid someone might see her talking to me. Yes, I said cautiously. She hesitated, then stepped closer. I'm Sarah Mitchell. For a second, I just stared at her. My heartbeat slowed and quickened at the same time. You're the woman in Amber's case. She nodded. Yes. David straightened subtly beside me. Sarah looked at me with something like disbelief. I've been following the hearing, she said. I didn't think they'd actually go through with it. I couldn't believe your parents were suing you to pay for her defense. A bitter laugh almost rose in my throat. Believe it. She glanced toward the courtroom again before continuing. Your sister didn't just assault me once. The air around me seemed to sharpen. She's been stalking me for 18 months. David's expression shifted instantly from polite curiosity to complete attention. 18 months? He repeated. Sarah nodded. Ever since I started dating her ex-fiancé, Trevor. There it was. The part no one in my family had bothered to say plainly. Not a misunderstanding. Not one isolated mistake. An obsession. A campaign. A pattern. Sarah's fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. At first it was messages, she said quietly. Then fake social media accounts. Then showing up at my office, at my gym, outside my apartment. She keyed my car last winter. She sent flowers with no card and then texted me details about what I was wearing that same day. A cold sickness moved through me. She followed us to the coast once, Sarah continued. Trevor thought I was imagining it until she grabbed me in a parking lot and shoved me into my own car door. I closed my eyes for 1 second. Of course Amber had done it. And of course my parents had turned it into a story where she was somehow the wronged one. I have documentation, Sarah said. Police reports, screenshots, photos, medical records from when she hit me, everything. David spoke carefully. Would you be willing to testify? She shook her head almost immediately. My lawyer advised against it. Not yet. There's still a criminal case building, and anything public could complicate that. Disappointment flashed through me, but before it could settle, Sarah reached into her bag. She pulled out a small flash drive. But this is everything I'm legally allowed to share. She held it out to me. My full timeline. Messages, incident reports, photos of the injuries, the restraining order paperwork, security stills from my building. Enough to show she's not some innocent girl being bullied by the system. I looked at the flash drive in her hand and felt something shift deep inside me. For weeks, I had been drowning in their version of events. Their language, their pressure, their accusations. For weeks, they had made me feel like I was defending myself with one hand while holding Noah above water with the other. And now, in the middle of a courthouse hallway, the truth had quietly walked up and introduced itself. Why are you helping me? I asked. Sarah's eyes softened. Because I know what it's like when people like Amber have an entire support system built around protecting them. She glanced toward the courtroom, and because what they're doing to you is wrong. I took the flash drive. It felt absurdly light for something that might change everything. When court resumed, David requested permission to submit new evidence. Victoria was on her feet before he finished speaking. Objection, prejudicial, irrelevant. David didn't even flinch. Your Honor, this evidence directly addresses the plaintiff's good faith. They are asking my client to fund the legal defense of an individual with a documented pattern of violence and stalking. Judge Morgan held out her hand. Bring it here. The courtroom fell silent as the flash drive was passed forward. I didn't breathe while she reviewed the contents. Didn't move. Didn't look at Amber. I only stared at the judge's face, and little by little, the neutrality there disappeared. Her mouth tightened. Her eyes hardened. When she finally looked up, the room felt colder. I knew then that something had broken. Not in me. In their story. And once the truth breaks through, it rarely goes back quietly. When Judge Patricia Morgan returned from the recess, the entire courtroom felt different. The quiet wasn't ordinary courtroom silence anymore. It was the heavy kind. The kind that settles in a room when everyone realizes something has shifted, even if they don't know exactly what yet. Judge Morgan placed the file on the bench and adjusted her glasses. Her expression was no longer neutral. It was grim. I've reviewed the materials submitted by the defense, she said. Across the aisle, Victoria Hayes straightened. Your Honor, we maintain that this information is prejudicial and irrelevant to the financial abuse claims. Judge Morgan raised one hand. Counsel. The word alone was enough to silence the room. I have seen enough. She turned slightly toward my parents. The plaintiffs claim they refinanced their home and assumed debt in order to defend a daughter they believe to be innocent. Amber shifted in her chair. Judge Morgan's gaze moved to her. However, the documentation provided paints a very different picture. The judge lifted a single sheet from the evidence file. There are police reports documenting repeated harassment. Another page. Threatening messages sent over a period of 18 months. Another. Medical photographs and incident reports confirming injuries sustained by Sarah Mitchell. Amber's composure finally cracked, just for a moment. Her lips tightened. My mother whispered something urgently to her, but Amber didn't respond. Judge Morgan set the papers down. I will not force Miss Davis to finance the legal defense of someone who, based on the evidence presented here, appears to have engaged in a pattern of violent and obsessive behavior. Victoria stood again, clearly trying to salvage something. Your Honor, regardless of the criminal allegations, this court is not blind to context, the judge interrupted. Her voice was calm, firm. And the context here is that the plaintiffs are attempting to compel their daughter to surrender money intended for the life-saving medical treatment of her child. The gavel struck the bench. The sound echoed through the courtroom. Case dismissed. For a moment, nobody moved. Not my parents. Not Amber. Not even Victoria. The tension that had been choking the air for months simply evaporated. David leaned toward me. We won. But the word won felt strange, hollow, because as I sat there listening to the courtroom empty around us, one thought kept pushing through my mind. Winning didn't change the fact that Noah was still sick. It didn't buy us more time. It didn't guarantee the treatment would work. It just meant no one could legally take the money I'd saved for him. Outside the courthouse, the Oregon sky was gray with rain again. David shook my hand before we parted ways. You did the right thing, he said. I nodded. But my chest still felt tight because the fight wasn't over. Not the one that mattered. 2 weeks later, I sat in Dr. Rebecca Foster's office at Oregon Health and Science University. Noah sat beside me on the examination table, swinging his legs slowly. Dr. Foster folded her hands on the desk. The leukemia has progressed faster than we anticipated. Her voice was gentle, but there was no soft way to say what came next. We need to get Noah to Johns Hopkins within the month. She paused. Or we may lose the window for the experimental protocol. I felt Noah's small hand slip into mine. That night, after he fell asleep, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The house was quiet, too quiet. I opened my laptop. Then I did something I had promised myself I would never do. I created a GoFundMe page. My hands shook as I typed. I wrote about Noah, about the leukemia, about the court case, about the treatment that could save him. And then I clicked publish. The response was overwhelming. My neighbor Grace showed up the next morning carrying a casserole and a check. That boy of yours has been mowing my lawn all summer for free, she said, wiping her eyes. Time I returned the favor. At school, my principal, Tom Rodriguez, organized a fundraiser. Students I had taught years ago came back. Some brought $20. Some brought $5. One girl handed me a crumpled envelope with $30 inside. "You helped me pass AP English," she said. "Let me help Noah now." Within 2 weeks, we had raised the remaining $55,000. The night before we left for Baltimore, my phone rang. "Aunt Crystal," I answered. Her voice sounded tired. "Lauren, I thought you should know." My stomach tightened. "Know what?" "Your parents lost the house." I blinked. "They couldn't keep up with the mortgage after refinancing." A pause. "And Amber took a plea deal." "How long?" 2 years. I closed my eyes. "I'm sorry," Crystal said quietly. And surprisingly, I realized I meant it when I answered. "I am too. Not sorry enough to sacrifice Noah, but sorry that things had fallen this far." "Your mom wants to talk to you," Crystal added. I shook my head. "No." "Lauren." "They tried to sacrifice my son's life for Amber's crimes." My voice was steady now. "There's no coming back from that." The line went quiet. "Family is family," Crystal said softly. "No," I replied. "Family doesn't do what they did." I hung up. The next morning, Noah and I boarded a flight to Baltimore. 6 months later, I sat in a hospital room at Johns Hopkins, watching my son play Minecraft on his tablet. The treatment was working. His white blood cell counts had stabilized. His cheeks were pink again. "Mom," Noah said excitedly. "Look." He held up the screen. "I built a castle with a moat." I laughed. "That's amazing." My phone buzzed with a text from Grace. "Saw your mom at Safeway today. She was using food stamps." Karma is something, huh? I didn't respond because Noah was laughing beside me, and that sound mattered more than anything else. Then another message appeared. Unknown number. "Lauren, it's Mom. Your father left. I'm living in Crystal's basement. I'm sorry. Can we talk?" I blocked the number. Seconds later, another unknown number texted. "This is Amber. I get out in 18 months. When I do, you're going to pay for what you did to me." I screenshot the message and sent it to David. Then I put my phone away. Because sitting there beside Noah, watching him laugh again, I realized something. They had already lost everything that mattered. Their house, their reputation, their relationships. Amber had a criminal record that would follow her forever. Meanwhile, I had my son. I had neighbors who became family, a community that saved his life. 1 year later, Noah was in remission. His hair had grown back, thick and wavy. His energy was endless. That evening, while we cooked spaghetti together, he asked me something quietly. "Mom, do you ever miss Grandma and Grandpa?" I thought carefully before answering. "I miss the people I thought they were." He nodded, then smiled. "But we have Grace and Mr. Rodriguez and all the people who helped us." "Yes," I said softly. "Sometimes the real family you have is the one you choose." Later that night, as Noah slept, my phone rang. Crystal again. "Your mother had a heart attack," she said. "She's asking for you." I closed my eyes. "I hope she gets better," I said. "But Noah and I have a good life now." "Lauren, family doesn't sue you for money meant to save your child's life." After I hung up, Noah appeared in the doorway in his pajamas. "I had a bad dream." I pulled him onto the porch swing and wrapped my arms around him. "Mom?" "Yeah?" "I'm glad it's just us." I kissed the top of his head. "Me too." Because sometimes the people who hurt you most share your blood. But the people who save you, they're the ones who choose to stand beside you when it matters. And those are the people worth calling family. My name is Natalie Brooks. I'm 29 years old, and the moment my life truly changed wasn't the day my relationship ended. It was the moment I realized the man I had loved for 3 years had never really existed. The truth is, betrayal rarely arrives quietly. Sometimes it shows up with 22,000 likes and 3,500 comments. I discovered it on a Monday morning. I had just poured myself a cup of coffee and was scrolling through Instagram when I saw a video that made my stomach drop. The face on the screen belonged to Jackson Holloway, my ex-boyfriend. Next to him stood a woman I recognized instantly, Kendra Hale, his new girlfriend. They were laughing, actually laughing. Jackson held the phone while Kendra leaned against him, both of them smiling like they had just won some private joke the rest of the world didn't understand. Then I saw the caption. Imagine being so pathetic your boyfriend has to fake cancer just to escape your boring life. Followed by, upgrade achieved. Sorry, not sorry. Living my best life. For a moment, I genuinely thought it was a parody account, but the blue verification checkmark told me it was real. My chest tightened as I read the comments. Thousands of strangers tearing me apart. She must have been abusive. Good for him for escaping. No man fakes cancer unless his girlfriend is psycho. I felt like I couldn't breathe because none of them knew the truth. Jackson and I had been together for 3 years. And 8 months earlier, he had supposedly survived lymphoma. The entire experience had been traumatic. The diagnosis, the treatments, the fear. I remembered sitting beside him in hospital waiting rooms, holding his hand while he stared at the floor like he was trying not to fall apart. I remembered driving him to chemotherapy appointments, holding him while he cried at night when the pain was too much. I remembered the day he shaved his head in our bathroom. He had looked at himself in the mirror and whispered, "I don't want to die." I held him while he sobbed. At least, I thought it was real. Our friends had rallied around him. My family had supported him. Even strangers had joined the cause. Fundraisers were organized. Benefit concerts, online donation campaigns. People bought merchandise with slogans like, "Fight like Jackson." The internet loved his story. A brave young man battling cancer with humor and positivity. By the time everything ended, nearly $200,000 had been raised, and I believed every single moment of it. Until 3 weeks ago. That was the day my reality cracked open. I had stopped at a coffee shop after work. While waiting for my latte, I noticed a familiar face standing near the counter. Dr. Alejandro Martinez, Jackson's oncologist, the man who had supposedly treated him. I walked over and smiled. "Dr. Martinez," I said warmly, "I just wanted to thank you again for everything you did for Jackson." The doctor looked at me politely, but his expression quickly turned confused. "I'm sorry," he said gently. "For who?" "My boyfriend," I replied. "Jackson Holloway. You treated him for lymphoma last year." The color drained from his face. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then he asked quietly, "Miss, are you certain about the name?" "Yes," I said. "Jackson Holloway." The doctor shook his head slowly. "I'm sorry," he said, "but I've never treated anyone by that name." My heart began pounding. "That's impossible," I whispered. "He came here for chemo every week." Dr. Martinez looked genuinely concerned now. "I think there must be some misunderstanding." I pulled out my phone and showed him photos of Jackson, pictures of us in hospital waiting rooms, selfies Jackson had posted from treatment days. The doctor studied the screen. Then he said the words that shattered everything. "I've never seen this man before in my life." The room started spinning. I remember gripping the edge of the counter just to stay upright. The diagnosis, the treatments, the hair loss, the suffering. Every moment I thought we had survived together. All of it suddenly felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. But I didn't confront Jackson. Not yet. Instead, I did something smarter. I started collecting evidence. Instead of confronting Jackson directly, I did something he clearly hadn't expected. I stayed quiet. And I started documenting everything. The first thing I did was contact the hospital where Jackson claimed he'd been receiving treatment. I didn't accuse anyone of anything. I simply told them I was concerned there might have been medical fraud connected to a fundraising campaign. Hospitals take that kind of thing extremely seriously. Within 24 hours, they called me back. The answer was simple. There was no patient named Jackson Holloway in their system. Not now. Not last year. Not ever. No medical records, no insurance claims, no appointments, nothing. It wasn't just that the doctor didn't remember him. Jackson had never been there at all. That was the moment the anger finally started replacing the shock. But I still needed more. Fortunately for me, Jackson had made one careless mistake when he moved out of my apartment. He left behind his old laptop. At the time, he said it was because the computer reminded him too much of his sick days. Now I understood why. The password hadn't even been changed. When the desktop loaded, I immediately noticed a folder sitting right in the center. It was labeled Props. My stomach dropped. I clicked it. What I found inside that folder felt like opening the door to a horror movie. There were dozens of files. Photoshop templates for hospital paperwork, fake medical test results, editable chemotherapy schedules, even tutorial videos titled things like How to Simulate Chemo Fatigue, Makeup Techniques for Pale Skin, Convincing Crying for Fundraising videos. There were receipts too, one for a professional bald cap used in theater productions. So no. Jackson never shaved his head. Every time I watched him lose his hair in our bathroom mirror, he had been wearing a prop. I kept digging. Then I found a spreadsheet. At first glance, it looked like a normal donation tracker, but the notes column made my blood run cold. One entry read, crime. Another said, hospital selfie day equals plus 8K. There were dozens of entries like that. He was documenting performance metrics, and then an email folder, 100 between Jackson and Kendra Hale, the same woman laughing in that Instagram video. The timestamps told the story clearly. These emails were sent months before Jackson's supposed diagnosis. One message from Kendra read, "The sympathy angle is perfect. People eat that stuff up." Another from Jackson said, "Once we hit the donation goal, we moved to Miami. Fresh start." Then came the message that made my hands start shaking. Jackson had written, "Just stick to the script, babe. Natalie will never question it. She believes everything." For a moment, I just sat there staring at the screen. 3 years of my life. Every hospital visit, every tear, every sleepless night, all of it had been part of a script. I didn't cry. Instead, I started taking screenshots. Everything. The spreadsheets, the emails, the tutorials. I uploaded copies to 3 separate cloud drives. Then I sent a full archive to my friend Dmitry Volkov, a lawyer I trusted. But I wasn't finished, because there was something else Jackson clearly hadn't thought through. Those fundraisers. People had donated from all over the country and falsely claiming to have cancer in order to collect money online. Isn't just immoral, it's wire fraud. Every single transaction counts as a separate offense. And Jackson had accepted donations from people in 14 different states. That meant something very serious. It meant this was now a federal crime. I was still preparing my next move when Jackson saw my first post. By that point, the story had already started spreading. The video he uploaded mocking me had reached 2.8 million views. And Jackson did exactly what people like him always do when the truth starts getting close. He went on the attack. That same night, he started an Instagram live stream. Kendra was sitting beside him, both of them wearing matching smirks. Jackson leaned toward the camera dramatically. "My ex-girlfriend," he said, "is making up crazy accusations because she's bitter I moved on." Kendra nodded sympathetically. "It's honestly scary," she added, "like stalker vibes." Jackson continued, "She's literally fabricating fake medical documents. It's pathetic." The comments exploded with support for him. Thousands of people believed every word. Within an hour, my social media accounts were flooded with harassment. Somebody found my LinkedIn profile and emailed my employer, claiming I was harassing a cancer survivor. I received dozens of messages calling me a monster. One person even sent a death threat. But Jackson wasn't done humiliating me. The next morning, he posted another video. This time he was shirtless, doing push-ups in his living room while Kendra filmed him. Text flashed across the screen. "When your broke ex tries to sue you for attention." The video hit 1 million views in a few hours. But then Jackson made a mistake. A huge one. Instead of backing down, he decided to double down. That afternoon, he announced a brand new fundraiser. It was called the Survivors Legal Defense Fund. Jackson claimed he needed money to fight defamation from an abusive ex-girlfriend. Within 6 hours, he had raised $12,000. That was when I finally played my first real card. I posted everything. The entire props folder. The spreadsheets. The emails. The tutorials. But most importantly, I posted the hospital's official written statement confirming they had no record of Jackson Holloway ever receiving treatment. And I added one more piece of evidence, a recording I found on the laptop. It showed Jackson standing in our bathroom mirror, practicing his chemo reaction. Fake gagging sounds, pretending to be weak, timing his breathing to look sick. When the video went live, the internet changed sides almost instantly. Jackson's comment section went from, "You're so brave," to, "Wait, what?" Then finally, "Oh my God. You're a fraud." But Jackson wasn't finished yet. He posted one last video. This time, he was crying, claiming the hospital had lost his medical records, claiming I had doctored the evidence. And then he announced something big. A live stream victory party, Friday night. Hundreds of people would attend in person. Thousands would watch online. Jackson promised he would reveal the real proof and expose me once and for all. What he didn't know was that someone else had already started watching him too. The day before Jackson's so-called victory party, my phone rang early Thursday morning. It was Dmitry Volkov. My lawyer friend rarely sounded excited about anything, but that morning his voice carried a sharp edge of disbelief. "Natalie," he said, "you need to see what I just found." I sat up in bed immediately. "What is it?" There was a pause. Then Dmitry said something that made my stomach twist. This wasn't Jackson's first scam. Within minutes, he forwarded me a series of documents he'd uncovered while digging through public records. The pattern became obvious almost instantly. In 2019, someone named Ethan Blake had claimed to be the victim of a house fire. Photos of a burned apartment had circulated online. Fundraisers had raised $30,000 to help him rebuild his life. In 2020, a man named Ryan Matthews had posted emotional videos about surviving a terrible car accident. Donations poured in again, roughly $15,000. Then in 2021, a man named Liam Carter had shared a tragic story about losing his sister to a sudden illness and needing help paying funeral expenses. Another $25,000. Each time, the social media accounts disappeared within months. Each time, the person vanished. Different cities, different names, but the face in every photo was Jackson. My skin felt cold as the realization settled in. "This is a pattern," I whispered. Dmitry agreed. And that's not the craziest part. He explained that someone involved in one of those earlier scams had already reported Jackson to federal authorities months ago, which meant something important. The FBI had already been watching him. They just hadn't moved yet. Not until Jackson made a big enough mistake. And launching a brand new fundraiser while under suspicion, that was more than enough. Later that afternoon, I received a call from a man who introduced himself simply as Agent Harrison. His voice was calm, professional, but there was no doubt about the authority behind it. "Ms. Brooks," he said, "we're aware of the situation involving Jackson Holloway." He asked if I would be willing to share the evidence I had gathered. I gave him everything. The folder, the emails, the spreadsheet, the recording. There was a short silence as he reviewed the materials. Finally, he said something that almost sounded impressed. "She documented her own crime." I blinked. "Excuse me?" Agent Harrison chuckled quietly. "Most people committing wire fraud aren't organized enough to create spreadsheets about it." He paused before continuing. "This evidence is extremely helpful." I asked him the question that had been sitting in the back of my mind since Dmitry's call. "Are you going to arrest him?" Agent Harrison didn't answer directly, but he did say one thing. "We'll be making a move soon." He couldn't tell me when or how, but I had a pretty good guess. Because Jackson's live stream party was scheduled for Friday night, and if federal agents wanted to catch him committing fraud publicly, that would be the perfect moment. Friday night arrived faster than I expected. At 8 p.m., Jackson's Instagram live stream began. I wasn't there in person, but I was watching the broadcast from my apartment. The viewer counter climbed rapidly. 3,000, 5,000, 7,000. People from all over the internet were tuning in. Jackson stood in the center of a brightly lit living room. Kendra stood beside him, smiling proudly. She was wearing an expensive red dress and had clearly spent hours on her makeup. Jackson looked equally theatrical. Silk shirt, perfectly styled hair. The entire scene looked less like a serious event and more like a cheap influencer award show. Behind them, a massive television screen displayed a slide that read, The truth. Music played loudly. Champagne glasses clinked. The room was packed with people. Kendra raised her phone and waved to the camera. "Welcome, everyone," she said cheerfully. Jackson spread his arms dramatically. "Tonight," he announced, "we celebrate." Cheers erupted from the crowd. "Tonight, we prove the truth," he continued. "Tonight, we expose the lies." The screen behind him flickered to life. Jackson began presenting what he claimed were his medical records, hospital charts, chemotherapy schedules, doctor signatures. At first glance, everything looked convincing. Then he played a pre-recorded video message. A man wearing a white coat appeared on screen. "I am Dr. Reynolds," the man said solemnly, "and I personally treated Jackson Holloway during his battle with lymphoma." The crowd applauded, but I already knew the truth. The doctor was actually an actor from Fiverr. Jackson had hired him for $200. Next, Jackson introduced a woman standing near the bar. "This is Brittany," he said proudly. "She was one of the nurses who cared for me during treatment." The woman waved shyly. She was wearing blue medical scrubs. Later, investigators would discover she was actually Kendra's cousin, and the scrubs came from Amazon. The audience had no idea. They were eating up every word. Champagne flowed. People cheered. Jackson's follower count continued climbing. 90,000. 95,000. Then it happened. At 8:43 p.m., Jackson lifted his glass. "To beating cancer," he said. "To beating the haters. To living our best life." And just as he began to drink, the front door exploded open. A voice shouted, "FBI! Everyone remain where you are!" The live stream didn't cut immediately. For about 45 seconds, the entire internet watched chaos unfold. Agents flooded the room. People screamed. Champagne glasses shattered on the floor. Kendra's face shifted from confusion to panic to pure rage. "This is harassment," she shouted. "I'm a cancer survivor. You can't do this." Agent Harrison stepped forward calmly. I recognized his voice instantly. He began reading Jackson his rights. Jackson tried to push past the agents. He didn't get far. Meanwhile, Kendra screamed accusations about jealous ex-girlfriends and conspiracies. The crowd scattered. Some people ran. Others pulled out their phones to film. Jackson attempted one final desperate move. He tried to vault over a couch and sprint toward the back door. It didn't work. 3 agents tackled him before he made it halfway across the room. The last thing viewers heard before the live stream abruptly ended was Kendra screaming hysterically, "I'll sue all of you." At that exact moment, the viewer counter hit 73,000. Within minutes, clips of the arrest began spreading across the internet. And just like that, Jackson Holloway's empire of lies collapsed in front of the entire world. By the next morning, the internet had exploded. I woke up to dozens of messages from friends asking if I had seen the news. Of course I had. Every major outlet was running the same headline and slightly different variations. "Influencer fakes cancer, steals $200,000, arrested during live stream." The clip of the FBI raid spread faster than anything Jackson had ever posted during his so-called cancer journey. For a man who had built his entire identity around attention, it was a spectacular kind of poetic justice. Except this time, the attention wasn't admiration. It was outrage. Within 48 hours, investigators began revealing the full scope of the fraud. And the numbers kept getting worse. Jackson and Kendra hadn't just fooled a few sympathetic followers. They had scammed over 2,000 individual donors, people from all across the country. Some of the stories made my stomach twist. One children's cancer charity had given Jackson what they called a courage grant. An elderly couple had donated part of their retirement savings. A teenage boy had sold his gaming console to contribute to the fundraiser, when in $247,893. That was the confirmed amount raised through the fake cancer campaign alone. And that didn't include the money from Jackson's previous scams. Jackson was arrested on multiple charges, 14 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of identity theft for using fake doctor names. Kendra faced charges as well. Turns out she had been deeply involved in the entire operation. Then something unexpected happened. 3 days, the woman on the other end sounded exhausted. Is this Natalie Brooks? Yes. My name is Gloria Hale. It took me a second to recognize the name. Then it hit me. Kendra's mother. Her voice cracked as she spoke. I thought my daughter was helping him through cancer. She told encouraging people to donate. She had even contributed $5,000 herself. I don't know how she became this person. For a moment, I actually felt sorry for her. But then, well, if you hadn't exposed them, Gloria continued, none of this would have happened. I frowned. What do you mean? I mean, she said defensively, Jackson probably would have paid people back eventually. In other words, even now, she couldn't fully admit what her daughter had done. That was the moment I realized something important. Sometimes the apple really doesn't fall far from the tree. A week later, Jackson was released on bail. His parents had put up their house as collateral. The court ordered several conditions. No internet access. No leaving the state. Surrender of his passport. Guess how long Jackson followed those rules? Less than 24 hours. Someone recorded him using a friend's phone to post a ranting video on Instagram. In it, Jackson claimed the entire investigation was corrupt. He said I had planted the evidence. He insisted he actually did have cancer, but the doctors had misdiagnosed him. He even blamed Kendra, claiming she had manipulated him into everything. The video lasted 5 minutes. It was completely unhinged. It also violated his bail conditions. Jackson was back in custody 12 hours later. Kendra reacted differently. She did what scammers often do when the truth finally catches up with them. She flipped. Her lawyer released a statement saying she had been manipulated by Jackson, describing him as a master con artist. In exchange for cooperation, she provided investigators with additional evidence, and what they found made the case even stronger. Recorded conversations where Jackson coached her on what to say during live streams, text messages detailing exactly how to fake medical documents, and perhaps the most disturbing discovery of all, a document titled Future Campaign Ideas. Inside were plans for other scams, fake pregnancy complications, fake assault claims, fake harassment lawsuits. Jackson had been planning years of fraud. The trial began 6 months later. Jackson entered the courtroom in a wheelchair. Apparently, he was now claiming the stress of being falsely accused had caused serious health problems. The judge looked unimpressed. The prosecution's evidence was overwhelming. My documentation, the FBI investigation, Kendra's testimony, bank records showing the money had been spent on luxury vacations, designer clothing, and cosmetic procedures. But the most powerful moments came from the victims. 23 people testified in court. One of them was an elderly man named Roger. He explained that his wife had died of lymphoma several years earlier. When he saw Jackson's fundraiser, he believed he was helping someone fighting the same battle. Roger had donated his late wife's life insurance payout. While he spoke, Jackson sat at the defense table, rolling his eyes. At one point, he even yawned. The jury noticed. So did the judge. When it was my turn to testify, I kept things simple. I explained how I discovered the truth, how I gathered the evidence, how the entire relationship had been built on deception. Jackson stared at me the entire time. I never looked back at him once. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. Then the verdict came. Guilty on all counts. 14 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of identity theft, 1 count of conspiracy to commit fraud, 1 count of money laundering. The judge delivered the sentence calmly. 8 years in federal prison, 3 years of supervised release, and $747,893 in restitution. They had discovered additional hidden accounts. Jackson didn't react with remorse. Instead, he stood up and shouted, "You're all just jealous of my success." As federal marshals escorted him away, he turned toward me. "This isn't over," he yelled. "I'll ruin you when I get out." The judge calmly added 6 extra months for threatening a witness. Kendra received 18 months after cooperating with prosecutors. Life slowly returned to normal after the trial. The fundraising platforms involved in the case implemented new verification rules. Medical claims now had to be confirmed directly with healthcare providers. I started therapy to process everything. Learning that 3 years of your life were built on lies does something strange to your mind. But eventually, things got better. A few months later, I met someone new, Daniel Carter. He's a software engineer. Quiet, honest, the exact opposite of the chaos I had lived through. Last week, I received a letter from Roger, the elderly man who testified. He thanked me for exposing Jackson. He said the case had restored his faith that some people still stand up for what's right. He recovered about $3,000 from the restitution payments. It wasn't everything, but it mattered. Jackson still has supporters online. There's even a small Facebook group called Free Jackson. They believe the entire case was a conspiracy. Occasionally, they send me threats. I forward every one of them directly to the FBI. As for me, I kept one thing from that entire nightmare: a screenshot from the live stream. The exact moment the FBI agents stormed the room and Jackson's face went from smug confidence to absolute panic. It's saved in a folder on my computer. The folder is labeled Karma. And sometimes, on bad days, I open it just to remind myself of one simple truth. Play stupid games. Win federal prison sentences. My name is Bianca Caldwell, and I am 54 years old. And the night my daughter graduated was the night the man I had built my life around decided to erase me from it. In front of 50 witnesses, crystal glasses, and a table full of people who already knew. The words hung in the air of Romano's Italian bistro like smoke that refused to clear. I've decided to start a new life without you. Richard's voice didn't shake when he said it, not even a tremor. He stood there at the head of the table, champagne glass raised, the toast meant for our daughter twisting into something else entirely, something colder, something deliberate. Around us, the restaurant froze. Forks paused mid-air. Laughter died mid-breath. 50 pairs of eyes turned, not toward Sophia, the graduate, but toward me, waiting for the collapse, the tears, the screaming, the humiliation they could later whisper about over coffee. I felt it, the weight of their expectation pressing against my chest. And for a brief, dangerous second, my fingers tightened around my napkin. 28 years. That's how long I had loved this man. That's how long I had built a life that, apparently, he had already packed into boxes somewhere else. I turned my head slightly. Sophia sat beside me, her graduation cap still perched perfectly on her auburn hair. But her face had drained of all color. "Mom," she whispered, barely audible. I reached over and placed my hand gently over hers. Steady. Grounded. Then I looked back at Richard, and I smiled. "Congratulations on your courage," I said softly. Not a tremor, not a crack. The silence that followed was heavier than any scream could have been. I saw it in his eyes, the flicker of confusion. That wasn't the reaction he had rehearsed. That wasn't the scene he had imagined. From the corner of my vision, I noticed movement. Vanessa Torres. She shifted uncomfortably at the back table, her posture suddenly less confident, her fingers tightening around the stem of her wine glass. The same Vanessa who had attended our Christmas dinners. The same Vanessa who had once called me, asking for advice about her marketing career. The same woman who had smiled at me like a friend while planning a life with my boyfriend behind my back. And the worst part? No one looked surprised. Not really. Which meant they had known. They had all known. The betrayal wasn't just sitting across from me. It was scattered around the table, dressed in polite smiles and lowered eyes. I inhaled slowly, then reached into my handbag. The leather felt familiar beneath my fingers, grounding, steadying. I pulled out a sealed, cream-colored envelope and placed it gently beside Richard's untouched plate of chicken marsala. "What's this?" he asked, his voice no longer triumphant, just slightly off balance. "Something for you to read later," I replied. Calm. Even. Like I wasn't standing in the center of my own undoing. Then I turned back to Sophia. Her eyes were glassy now, her lips trembling despite her effort to stay composed. I leaned in and kissed her cheek, breathing in the soft vanilla scent she had worn since high school. "I am so proud of you," I whispered. "This day is still about you." Her fingers clutched mine tighter. "Mom, please don't." I squeezed her hand gently. "I'm not going to make a scene." Because that's what he wanted. A spectacle, a breakdown. Something he could point to later and say, "See? This is why I had to leave. I wouldn't give him that. I stood slowly, smoothing down my navy dress, the same one Richard had complimented that morning. Funny, the things people say before they destroy you. I turned to the table. Please enjoy your meal, I said, addressing the room with quiet grace. I wish you all a lovely afternoon. No one spoke. No one moved. And that silence, that suffocating, stunned silence, followed me all the way to the door. The heavy oak swung open, then shut behind me. And just like that, the noise of the restaurant disappeared. Outside, the Houston heat hit me like a wall. Thick, heavy, real. I inhaled deeply. For the first time in months, I could breathe. Behind me, the door slammed open again. Bianca! Richard's voice, no longer confident, no longer controlled, cracked through the air. What the hell is this? What have you done? I didn't turn around. I just kept walking, step by step, toward my silver Lexus parked at the curb. And as I reached for the handle, I allowed myself a small, quiet smile. Because the envelope I had handed him, that wasn't a reaction. It was the beginning of something I had been building, piece by piece, in silence. While he thought I was blind, while he thought I was weak, while he thought I trusted him completely. That had always been his greatest mistake. Because while Richard Caldwell had been planning his escape, I had been planning his fall. And unlike him, I never act without knowing exactly how the story ends. 3 months earlier, everything had still looked normal. That was the dangerous part. Nothing in our home had shifted dramatically. There were no dramatic arguments, no slammed doors, no obvious signs that something was breaking beneath the surface. But I had spent 25 years working in finance, and numbers don't lie. People do. It started with something small, a transfer, $500. At first, I almost dismissed it. We had multiple accounts, joint savings, investment portfolios, business-related expenses. Money moved around all the time. But this transfer didn't follow a pattern. No label, no explanation, no corresponding record in our shared budget tracker. 2 days later, another one appeared. $800, different amount, same destination account. That was when the quiet unease began to settle in my chest. Not panic, not yet, just awareness. The kind that sharpens your senses, that makes you pay attention to things you might have otherwise ignored. I didn't confront Richard. That would have been the emotional response. And emotions cloud judgment. Instead, I watched, listened, collected. Over the next 2 weeks, the pattern became clearer. Small transfers, consistent, intentional, always to the same unknown account. It wasn't reckless spending. It was calculated. And that told me everything I needed to know. Richard had never been careless with money. Impulsive, yes. Short-sighted, often, but never sloppy, which meant this wasn't a mistake. This was a plan. I began with the easiest place to look, our credit card statements. At first glance, everything seemed ordinary. Groceries, utilities, occasional dinners. Then I saw it, Tony's, a high-end restaurant downtown. We hadn't been there in over a year. I remembered because it had been our anniversary dinner, the last one that still felt genuine. A few days later, another charge. Brennan's, another one. Tiffany and Company. That one made my fingers still over the keyboard. I hadn't received any jewelry. I didn't ask questions. I didn't confront him when he came home that night, loosening his tie and complaining about traffic like everything was normal. I smiled. I nodded. I played my role because by then, I already knew. Or at least, I knew enough. But knowing isn't the same as proving, and I needed proof. The next shift wasn't in the numbers. It was in him. Richard started working late 3 nights a week. At first, he offered explanations. Client meetings, new opportunity, just trying to get ahead. I had heard those lines before. They used to come with excitement. Now they came with distance. His phone was always face down, always within reach. Always locked. He laughed less at my jokes. He stopped asking about my day. And at night, when we lay in the same bed, there was a space between us that felt wider than the room itself. Still, I said nothing, because something inside me, something quiet but firm, told me, wait. So I did. The confirmation came on a Tuesday morning. Ordinary. Forgettable. The kind of day that doesn't feel like it's about to change your life. Richard had left his phone on the kitchen counter, unlocked. He was in the shower upstairs, water running, steam filling the bathroom. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the screen. My reflection stared back at me in the black glass. Calm, controlled, unrecognizable. Then I picked it up. I didn't search randomly. I went straight to his messages. And there she was. Vanessa. My chest didn't tighten. My breath didn't catch. If anything, everything inside me went very, very still. Their messages weren't hidden. That was the first insult. He hadn't even tried to protect me from the truth. Scrolling through them felt like reading a story about strangers. Dinner plans. Inside jokes. Photos of places I had never been invited to. And then the future. Our place by the water is going to be perfect. I can't wait until this is over. After Sophia's graduation, everything changes. My thumb paused, then moved again. Further down, and then I saw it. The message that would replay in my mind over and over again. Richard, I'll tell her it's over. A public setting is better. She won't make a scene in front of everyone. Vanessa, and she has no idea about the money we've saved. Richard, none. Bianca trusts me completely. That's always been her weakness. For a moment, I couldn't feel my hands. It wasn't just the betrayal. It wasn't even the affair. It was the precision, the calculation, the way he had studied me and used what he knew against me. My trust, my composure, my dignity. He had turned them into tools, weapons, against me. I set the phone back down exactly where it had been, aligned with the edge of the counter, screen facing the same direction, no trace. Then I walked to the sink, turned on the water, and stared at my reflection. The woman looking back at me wasn't broken. She wasn't crying. She wasn't even angry. Not yet. She was thinking, because something inside me had shifted. Not shattered. Shifted. The pain came later, in waves. Quiet ones. The kind that hit you when you're folding laundry or brushing your teeth. Memories replaying differently now. The dinners, the laughter, the promises. Had any of it been real, or had I simply chosen to believe it was? That night, Richard came home and kissed my cheek like he always did. Long day, he said. I smiled. Me too. And in that moment, something in me settled. Not forgiveness, not acceptance. Clarity. If he was planning a new life, then I would make sure he paid for the one he was trying to leave behind. I didn't confront him. I didn't cry. I didn't ask why. Because the truth is, why doesn't change anything. Instead, I opened my laptop and I began to prepare. Because if Richard Caldwell believed that I was weak, if he believed that my trust made me blind, then he had already lost. He just didn't know it yet. And when he finally realized it, it would be far too late. I have never been the kind of woman who breaks things in anger. I put them back together. I study the fracture line. I trace the pressure point. I learn exactly where the damage began. And then I decide what deserves to be salvaged and what deserves to collapse. That was how I handled the next several weeks. While Richard smiled across dinner tables and pretended to care about flower arrangements for Sophia's graduation party, I built a case against him in silence, methodically, carefully. The way an architect draws a building no one else can yet see. The first call I made was to Patricia Hernandez. Her name had come from a colleague at Meridian Capital, a woman who had gone through a brutal divorce and emerged with her finances intact and her dignity sharpened like a blade. Patricia's office sat on the 14th floor of a glass building downtown, all clean lines, dark wood, and discreet power. The receptionist wore the expression of someone who had seen every kind of devastation come through those doors and no longer blinked at any of it. Patricia herself was in her 60s, elegant, unsmiling, and razor precise. She read the prenuptial agreement in complete silence, one manicured finger moving down the page while I sat across from her, trying not to feel the full humiliation of why I was there. At last, she looked up. "This document is ironclad," she said. There was no sympathy in her tone, only fact. "Richard insisted on it," I replied, my voice quieter than I intended. At the time, my father's construction business was thriving. I had more family money than he did. He said it was only fair that we protect both sides. Patricia's mouth curved slightly, though not quite into a smile. "Men like fairness," she said, "when they think it will save them." She turned the agreement toward me and tapped one section with her pen. "The fidelity clause works both ways. If we can prove infidelity, you are in a very strong position. The house, most joint assets, full protection of your retirement accounts. Potential reimbursement claims for undisclosed fund transfers as well." For the first time since I had opened Richard's messages, I felt something that wasn't grief. It wasn't relief either. It was steadiness, a floor beneath me. "So he can't just walk away with everything?" I asked. Patricia leaned back in her chair. "No," she said. "He can walk away, but he will not walk away comfortable." I should not have found comfort in that, but I did. After that meeting, the process became almost clinical. Evidence first, emotion later. I returned home that evening and made dinner while Richard talked about nothing. Traffic, a new supplier, a story about someone from his gym. I nodded in the right places and passed him the salt, while mentally cataloging every lie wrapped in his ordinary voice. The next morning, I began collecting screenshots of the messages, copies of account transfers, credit card statements showing dinners, jewelry, hotel charges. A pattern emerged quickly, ugly in its consistency. This was not one reckless lapse. It was a parallel life. Lunches at expensive restaurants, boutique hotel bookings downtown, jewelry purchases I had never seen, real estate searches for beachfront condos in Galveston, even a private wine tasting booking for two on a weekend Richard had told me he was at a leadership retreat. Every document felt like another door unlocking. Every lie had a receipt. Patricia referred me to a private investigator named Owen Pike, discreet, efficient, and utterly without curiosity. The kind of man who understood that sometimes the less you said, the more valuable you became. He documented what I could not. Afternoon meetings at the Marriott. Richard and Vanessa leaving a restaurant hand in hand. An embrace in a parking garage that was far too intimate to be explained away. Photographs time-stamped, printed, and placed in a neat folder that landed on Patricia's desk 48 hours later. I stared at those pictures longer than I meant to, not because I needed convincing, but because betrayal looks different when it's frozen. Still, undeniable. There they were, Richard and Vanessa, smiling like people who thought they were standing at the beginning of something beautiful. And all I could think was, you built that happiness with bricks stolen from my life. There were moments, of course, when the woman in me tried to outrun the strategist. Moments late at night when Richard was asleep beside me, and I stared at the ceiling, wondering if I should wake him up, throw the phone in his face, and ask him the one question that kept pulsing in my chest. When did I stop being enough? But every time that weakness rose, another memory came with it. His message. A public setting is better. She won't make a scene in front of everyone. He was counting on my dignity to protect himself. That knowledge cured me of hesitation. The timing mattered almost as much as the evidence. I knew he had chosen Sophia's graduation dinner for a reason. Public, polished, symbolic. He would paint himself as honest, brave, finally stepping into truth. And if I reacted emotionally, I would become the unstable woman left behind while he and Vanessa stepped neatly into the life they had scripted. So I chose my own timing. I would not stop his performance. I would replace the ending. Patricia filed the divorce papers quietly. We arranged to have them served the morning of graduation, early enough to destabilize him, late enough that he would still try to proceed with his announcement out of pride, arrogance, or disbelief. Patricia thought he might cancel. I knew better. Richard had always loved an audience too much to surrender one. Then came the envelope. the one I would place beside his untouched plate at Romano's, the one that would turn triumph into panic. Inside, Patricia inserted a single sheet of cream letterhead. Not dramatic, not lengthy, just devastating. Mr. Caldwell, please be advised that as of 3 p.m. today, all joint accounts have been frozen pending divorce proceedings. Your personal account remains accessible. We look forward to discussing the prenuptial agreement's fidelity clause at your earliest convenience. I read it 3 times before sealing it. Simple, elegant, final. A part of me wanted to include more. Screenshots, perhaps. A copy of the investigator's photos. Some cutting line about trust and consequences. But Patricia had shaken her head. Power, she told me, is almost always quieter than people expect. So quiet was what I chose. Meanwhile, Richard went on underestimating me. He hid suitcases in the back of his closet behind winter coats. He deleted some messages, though not enough. He started humming in the shower again, as though anticipation had made him young. Once, while pouring himself coffee, he actually smiled and said, "After Sophia graduates, maybe everything will finally settle down." I looked at him over the rim of my mug. "Yes," I said, "I think it will." The lie slid out smoothly. That frightened me a little. How calm I had become. How deliberate. But maybe betrayal does that. Maybe when someone dismembers your future in secret, the only way to survive is to become colder than the blade. 2 nights before graduation, I stood alone in our closet and looked at his packed luggage. Shirts folded neatly, shoes in travel bags, toiletries sealed in plastic. A whole departure prepared in advance, efficient and confident and obscene in its optimism. He had really believed he could humiliate me publicly, move into his new life, and leave me standing in the wreckage, smiling politely for our guests. I touched one of the suitcase handles and felt, unexpectedly, not sorrow, but clarity. He had mistaken my softness for helplessness, my patience for ignorance, my loyalty for weakness. That was his final miscalculation. By the time graduation day arrived, everything was ready. The documents, the evidence, the attorney, the frozen accounts, the envelope. And beneath all of it, beneath the planning and the paperwork and the steel I had forced into myself, there was one quiet truth I hadn't spoken aloud to anyone. I was not only preparing to punish Richard, I was preparing to survive the woman I would become after him. 3 hours after I walked out of Romano's, I heard Richard's car before I saw him. The roar of his BMW tore into the quiet of the driveway. Too fast, too aggressive. Like noise alone could restore the control he had already lost. The front door slammed hard enough to rattle the glass panels. "Bianca!" His voice echoed through the house, sharp, frantic, stripped of the confidence he had worn like a second skin just hours earlier. "Where are you?" I was exactly where I intended to be, sitting in the living room, calm, composed, my laptop open in front of me, a spreadsheet glowing on the screen. Not because I needed to work, but because I wanted him to see that I could, that my world had not ended just because his had begun to collapse. I closed the laptop slowly as his footsteps pounded down the hallway. He appeared in the doorway seconds later, disheveled, face flushed, the envelope clenched tightly in his hand, like it might somehow reverse what it contained. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, waving the paper. "You served me divorce papers today? You froze our accounts? On Sophia's graduation day?" I tilted my head slightly. "I thought it aligned nicely with your plans," I said evenly. "You wanted to start your new life. I'm simply helping facilitate the transition." His jaw tightened. "You had no right." "I had every right," I cut in, my voice still controlled, still quiet. "Just as you had every right to choose Vanessa." The name landed between us like glass. He flinched. Barely. But I saw it. "We all make choices, Richard," I continued. "Now we live with the consequences." For a moment, he said nothing. Then his expression shifted. Smugness crept back in, thin and desperate. "The prenup expired years ago," he said, folding his arms as if reclaiming ground. "Any lawyer will tell you that. You can't touch the business. You can't touch the investments. I let the silence stretch just long enough. Then I smiled. Small. Measured. Actually, I said, it didn't. The color drained from his face so quickly it was almost fascinating. Section 12, I continued, my tone almost conversational, specifically states that the fidelity clause remains in effect for the duration of the relationship. Your lawyer should have explained that to you. I paused. Let it settle. Oh, wait, I added softly. You didn't consult one, did you? That was the moment it broke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But unmistakably. Reality hit him. Hard. The prenup he had once insisted on, the document he believed would protect him, had just become the mechanism that would dismantle everything he thought he owned. You can't do this, he said, his voice dropping, losing its edge. I built that business from nothing. We built this life together, I replied, and you chose to end it, just not in the way you expected. His phone buzzed in his hand. Once. Twice. 3 times. He glanced at it. Ignored it. Vanessa, no doubt, waiting. Expecting him to show up victorious. You've always been calculating, Bianca, he said, trying a different angle, his voice softening. But this is cold. What about everything we've had? 28 years. Does that mean nothing to you? For a moment, just a moment, I saw it. A flicker of the man I had loved, the one who had held my hand through hospital corridors, the one who had whispered promises in the dark, and it hurt. God, it hurt. But pain doesn't erase truth. Our history meant everything to me, I said quietly. His shoulders loosened, just slightly. Hope. Fragile. Misplaced. That's why your betrayal cut so deeply. The hope died as quickly as it came. Then maybe we can fix this, he pushed, stepping closer. I made a mistake. People make mistakes. We can work through this. I shook my head slowly. This wasn't a mistake, Richard. I stood, met him at eye level. This was a plan. I walked past him, picked up my phone from the table, and tapped the screen. The recording started playing. His voice filled the room. I'll tell her it's over. A public setting is better. She won't make a scene in front of everyone. Vanessa's voice followed. And she has no idea about the money we've saved. Then his again. None. Bianca trusts me completely. That's always been her weakness. Silence. Heavy. Absolute. When I looked back at him, he looked hollow. You recorded me? He whispered. That's illegal. Not here, I replied calmly. One-party consent. I slipped the phone back onto the table. I didn't record your private moments, I added. Just the ones where you planned to deceive me. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing now, restless, trapped. I need to make some calls, he muttered. Of course, I said lightly. Your attorney would be a good place to start. I'll be staying at Claire's tonight, I added, reaching for my bag. He froze. Claire's? You should call your sister first, I said, pausing at the doorway. She's quite upset with you. His confusion deepened. What are you talking about? She saw you and Vanessa last Christmas, I said. At the Galleria. She confronted you. Gave you a chance to end it. I watched the realization spread across his face. When you didn't, she came to me. Another crack. Another piece falling away. My own sister, he muttered. Ironic, I said softly. His phone buzzed again. This time, he looked and groaned. Problem? I asked. Vanessa's at the apartment, he said, frustration bleeding through. She's already moved her things in. I smiled. The kind of smile that doesn't need to be explained. The apartment you applied for, I asked? The one with both your names on the lease? He nodded. That application was flagged, I said. Credit verification issues. It was never approved. His eyes widened. The leasing office called the house to confirm details, I added. I handled it. For a second, he just stared at me, as if seeing me for the first time, not as the woman he had underestimated, but as the woman who had already dismantled the life he thought he was stepping into. You ruined everything, he said hoarsely. No, I replied. You did. I slung my bag over my shoulder. You have until tomorrow evening to remove your things, I said. After that, the locks will be changed. As I reached the door, his voice cracked behind me. What about Sophia? I stopped. Slowly. Turned back. The calm finally fractured. Don't you dare use our daughter as a shield, I said, the first edge of real anger cutting through my voice. You weren't thinking about her when you planned your little performance. He said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. I opened the door, stepped outside, and didn't look back. Because inside that house, everything he had built on lies was already collapsing. And I was done standing under it. The courtroom smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood. Rain tapped steadily against the tall windows, a quiet, persistent rhythm that seemed to underline every word spoken inside. I sat beside Patricia Hernandez, my hands folded neatly in my lap, my posture straight, not out of nervousness, but out of habit. Across the room, Richard sat with his lawyer, a young man, too young. His suit fit well, but his confidence didn't. He kept adjusting his tie, flipping through documents too quickly, as if hoping the right answer might appear if he moved fast enough. Richard looked smaller, not physically, but something about him had shifted. The certainty, the arrogance, the ease with which he used to occupy space, gone. Replaced with tension, with calculation that came too late. Judge Morrison entered without ceremony. Silver hair, sharp eyes, no patience. Exactly the kind of woman I trusted to see through performance. She took her seat and began reviewing the documents in silence. The prenup lay open in front of her, 28 years old. Still intact, still binding, still, ironically, the most honest thing Richard had ever insisted on. Counsel, she said finally, looking over her glasses at Richard's attorney. Do you contest the validity of this agreement? The young lawyer cleared his throat. Your Honor, we believe the agreement may have expired due to the length of the relationship. Section 18, Judge Morrison interrupted calmly, scanning the page, states that the agreement remains in effect for the duration of the relationship and any legal proceedings resulting from its dissolution. She looked up. There is no expiration clause. The silence that followed was not dramatic. It was final. Richard leaned toward his lawyer, whispering urgently, but the young man's expression had already shifted. He knew. They had nothing. The judge continued, flipping through the financial documents. These transfers, she said, tapping the page lightly, indicate systematic movement of funds to an undisclosed account over an extended period of time. She paused, then looked directly at Richard. This constitutes a violation of financial disclosure requirements under Section 23. His shoulders stiffened. I am ruling to maintain the freeze on all joint accounts pending full financial discovery, she continued. The primary residence will remain under Ms. Caldwell's control, as outlined in the fidelity clause. The words landed without flourish, without drama. But they carried weight, years of it. And just like that, it was over. Not the divorce. Not yet, but the illusion. The version of reality Richard had believed he could control. It had collapsed completely. 6 months later, my life no longer resembled the one I had walked out of. The house in River Oaks felt different now. Not because the furniture had changed, but because the silence had. It was no longer heavy. It was peaceful. I had moved my office into the sunlit room overlooking the garden. Where I once paid bills and managed household budgets, I now ran Caldwell Financial Transitions, my own consultancy. The dream I had postponed for decades. The one I had quietly buried under responsibilities, compromises, and someone else's ambitions. Now it was mine. Fully. Completely. My first clients came through Patricia. Women standing at the edge of their own unraveling. Divorces. Loss. Sudden instability. I recognized the look in their eyes because I had worn it myself, and I knew exactly how to guide them through it. Not just with numbers, but with clarity, with strategy, with the quiet understanding that survival isn't about holding on to what was, it's about building something stronger from what remains. Word spread, Slowly at first, then faster. And for the first time in years, I wasn't supporting someone else's future. I was building my own. Sophia called often, her voice steadier now, stronger. She had taken a position at a marketing firm in Austin, throwing herself into work the way she always had. Focused, determined, resilient. "I'm proud of you, Mom," she told me one evening. I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the fading light in the garden. "I'm proud of you too," I replied. There was a pause, a soft one. "I didn't know," she said quietly, "about Dad, about everything." "I know," I said, "and I'm glad you didn't, because some illusions deserve to end all at once. Not slowly, not painfully, just clean." Richard, on the other hand, did not rebuild so easily. His craft brewing venture collapsed within months. Without structure, without discipline, without me. Vanessa didn't stay. Of course she didn't. The life they had imagined together had been built on money, convenience, and illusion. Once those things disappeared, so did she. I heard, through mutual acquaintances, that she had moved on quickly. A real estate developer, someone stable, someone with actual assets. It would have hurt once. Now it simply felt predictable. Most of our shared friends distanced themselves from Richard, not out of loyalty to me, but because the truth, once exposed, has a way of making people uncomfortable. And Richard had never been very good at standing alone. The final hearing fell on what would have been our 29th anniversary. I noticed the date only when Patricia mentioned it in passing. Fitting. Some endings choose their own symmetry. We stood outside the courthouse afterward, the air cool and clear. No rain this time. No heaviness, just quiet. Richard approached me slowly, carefully, like someone unsure whether they were still allowed to exist in your world. "I made a mistake," he said. His voice was softer now. "Stripped of performance, stripped of pride. Is there any chance we could—" "No." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't hesitate. I didn't need to. "That door is closed." He nodded. "Once. And for the first time in a very long time, I believed he understood. "I hope you find happiness," he said. There was no manipulation in it, no angle, just truth. "Thank you," I replied. And I meant it, because holding on to anger would have meant holding on to him, and I was done carrying anything that belonged to my past. As I walked away from the courthouse, I realized something unexpected. The envelope I had handed him that night at Romano's. It hadn't just been revenge. It had been a key, a quiet, unassuming key, to a door I hadn't even known existed. Behind it, there was no humiliation, no betrayal, no version of myself shaped by someone else's choices. There was only space. And in that space, I had rebuilt something far more valuable than the life I lost. I had rebuilt myself. My name is Danica Sterling, and I'm 26 years old. And the night my parents publicly erased me from their lives was the night I finally understood that they had never truly seen me as their daughter to begin with. But to explain how everything fell apart, I have to take you back to a much quieter kind of damage. The kind that doesn't scream. The kind that settles into your bones and teaches you, slowly, that love is something you have to earn. I grew up in Shaker Heights, a polished suburb just outside Cleveland, in a house that looked like it belonged on the cover of a magazine. White columns, perfect lawn, a dining room table that could seat 12 but somehow always felt too small for the expectations placed on it. From the outside, we were the kind of family people admired. Inside, we were something else entirely. "Danica, why can't you be more like Victoria?" That was my mother's favorite question. Not because she wanted an answer, but because she already believed she had one. Victoria, my older sister, was everything our parents valued. Brilliant, composed, already mapping out her future in law before she even graduated high school. My father adored her. My mother showcased her like proof of a successful life. And then there was me, the middle child, the almost, the "why can't you just try harder?" "I got B's, Mom," I remember saying once, standing in the kitchen with my report card clenched in my hand. "That's still good." "Good isn't excellent," she replied without even looking up from her phone. Victoria doesn't bring home good. My father was worse in a quieter way. He evaluated. Every dinner felt like a performance review. "Let's talk about your future," he'd say, folding his hands like he was sitting across from a client instead of his daughter. Victoria would follow him into corporate law. Grant, my younger brother, was expected to become a surgeon. And me? I was supposed to fit neatly into whatever version of success made the family look complete. But I didn't. Not even a little. "I want to be a social worker," I told them during my senior year of high school. I can still remember the silence. It wasn't loud. It was surgical, precise, dissecting. "A social worker?" my father repeated, like the words themselves offended him. "It matters," I said, my voice shaking but steady enough. "Helping people matters." "It's beneath this family," my mother cut in, her tone final. "We didn't raise you to throw your potential away." That was the moment something shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just permanently. Because for the first time, I didn't bend. I applied anyway. And when I got into Case Western Reserve with a partial scholarship, they made their position clear. "If you want to live like that," my father said, "you'll do it without our support." So I did. I took out loans, worked nights at a diner, studied between shifts and exhaustion, and slowly, painfully, I built a life that belonged to me. But independence comes with a cost, and mine was my family. They didn't cut me off all at once. That would have been easier. Instead, they faded. Phone calls became shorter, then rarer, then non-existent. Family dinners turned into quiet humiliations. "Oh, Danica made it," Victoria would say, smiling in that tight, polished way. "Must not have had too many troubled cases tonight." Grant would avoid my eyes. Later, he'd whisper, "If you just went back to school, things could go back to normal." But I didn't want normal. Not their version of it. And then I met Cole. He wasn't what my parents would have chosen. Not even close. He worked with his hands, custom furniture, every piece crafted from raw wood into something beautiful and lasting. He drove a pickup truck, wore worn-in boots, and spoke with a quiet confidence that didn't need validation. But more than anything, he saw me. Not as a disappointment, not as potential wasted, just me. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone," he told me once, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear after a long shift. "You already are enough." No one had ever said that to me before. And I believed him, which, in my family, was a problem. "You're dating a construction worker?" my mother had demanded when I told her. "He's a craftsman," I corrected. He's blue collar," my father interrupted. "Do you have any idea how that reflects on us?" "I don't care how it reflects on you." "Well, you should," my mother snapped. "You represent this family." I laughed then. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. "Do I?" I asked. "Because you've spent my entire life making it clear I don't." That conversation didn't end well. They gave me a choice, them or Cole. And for the first time in my life, I chose myself. For 2 years, I didn't exist to them. No birthdays, no holidays, no calls. Victoria posted family photos captioned, "Complete family." I wasn't in them. Grant texted occasionally, always quietly, like he was afraid of being caught. "They don't talk about you," he once admitted. That hurt more than anything else. Not anger, not rejection, just erasure. But Cole's family filled in the silence. His mother, Linda, hugged me like I had always belonged. "We love you for who you are," she told me. That's what real family does. And for a while, that was enough. Until 3 months before my 26th birthday, my phone rang. And everything began to change. "Danica," my mother said, her voice softer than I remembered. "We've been thinking. Life's too short for this distance." I froze. Because hope is dangerous when it comes from people who taught you how to live without it. "We want to make things right," she continued. "We want to celebrate you, properly." "Celebrate me?" I repeated. "Yes, a birthday party. Invite everyone, your friends, Cole, his family." My heart started to race. Not with fear, with something worse. Hope. I should have been suspicious, I said later to Cole as we sat on the edge of our bed. You still can be, he replied gently. People don't just change overnight. But I wanted to believe they could. I miss them, I admitted. Even if they're like this, I still miss having parents. Cole nodded slowly, then took my hand. Then we go, he said. But we go carefully. I smiled, not realizing yet that careful wouldn't be enough. Because the party they were planning was never meant to celebrate me. It was meant to end me. For the next few weeks, my mother transformed into someone I barely recognized. She called often, too often. At first, it felt comforting in a way that made me ashamed of how quickly I softened. She asked about my favorite flowers, my dress size, whether I preferred dark chocolate or milk. She wanted to know which coworkers I was close to, which relatives I still kept in contact with, whether Cole's parents had any dietary restrictions. Every question was wrapped in a tone so careful, so measured, that I kept mistaking it for tenderness. We want this to be beautiful, she told me one evening. If we're doing this, we want to do it properly. Properly. That word should have warned me. In my family, properly never meant lovingly. It meant publicly, formally, in a way that could be witnessed, documented, admired. Still, I let myself believe. Maybe because I was tired of carrying the grief of being unwanted. Maybe because some childish part of me still thought that if they just looked at me long enough, really looked, they would finally see someone worth loving. Dad called too. That shook me more than my mother's sudden warmth. My father was not a man who called for emotional reasons. He called when something needed to be managed, negotiated, corrected. So when he phoned me directly one Tuesday afternoon and said, "Danica, I want you to know we've done some soul searching," I nearly sat down on the sidewalk outside my office. He sounded calm, sincere, even a little tired. "We may not have understood your choices," he said, "but that doesn't mean we should have pushed you away." I closed my eyes right there in the cold Cleveland wind, clutching my phone with both hands, like it was something fragile and holy. "Thank you," I whispered, because I didn't trust myself to say more. When I told Cole that night, I cried. Not dramatically. Not in sobs, just tears slipping down my face while I folded laundry in our apartment, overwhelmed by the strange ache of being offered a version of love I had wanted for so long. Cole leaned against the doorway and watched me quietly. "I'm glad you're happy," he said. That should have sounded reassuring. Instead, it sounded careful. "You still don't trust them," I said. He hesitated. "No," he answered honestly. "I trust what they want people to see. That's not the same thing." I stopped folding one of his shirts and looked at him. "They invited your family, too." "That doesn't make me trust them more," he said. "It makes me wonder why they want an audience." That word lingered in the room after he said it. Audience. I laughed it off then, or at least I tried to. "You're being protective," I told him. "I am being protective," he replied, "because I love you, and because people who spent 2 years pretending you didn't exist don't usually come back with ballroom reservations and handwritten invitations unless there's something in it for them." I wanted to argue, but I couldn't, because beneath all my hope, there was something else, a thin wire of unease. It pulled tighter every time my mother said something slightly off. "We want everyone there," she told me during one planning call. "All the people who matter." Another time she said, "It's important that this night be remembered." And once, when I asked if maybe we could keep it smaller, more intimate, she went completely silent for a beat too long before answering. "No," she said finally, her tone almost sharp. "If this family is moving forward, people need to see it. People need to see it." I should have listened to the part of myself that flinched, but instead, I focused on details. The venue was the Intercontinental downtown. Elegant, expensive, the kind of place my parents used when they wanted to impress donors, clients, and anyone whose opinion they considered valuable. Formal invitations were mailed out on heavy cream cardstock with gold script. My mother sent me photos of centerpiece options. My father asked whether I'd prefer a speech before dinner or after. It all felt absurdly elaborate for someone they had spent years treating like a stain on the family name. And yet, every time I began to doubt, they did something that pulled me back in. My mother complimented my work. My father asked Cole about his business without sounding condescending. Victoria sent me a text saying, "I know things have been bad, but maybe this is a chance to reset." Even Grant seemed relieved. "This could be good," he said one afternoon when he called me from the hospital between shifts. "They've been different lately." "Different how?" he exhaled. Less angry, more reflective. Grant had always spoken about our parents the way people speak about weather systems. Dangerous, but inevitable. He never confronted them. He just adjusted himself around them and called that peace. Still, hearing optimism from him made me want to believe it more. By the week of the party, I had almost convinced myself the worst was over. Cole bought his first real suit for the occasion. A navy one that made his shoulders look broad and his expression even gentler somehow. He stood in front of the mirror in the fitting room, tugging awkwardly at the cuffs while I laughed. "You look handsome," I told him. "I look like I'm being cross-examined by a bank manager," he muttered. I smiled and fixed his tie. "You look like the man I love." He softened then, his hands settling at my waist. "If anything feels wrong," he said quietly, "we leave. No explanations, no staying to be polite." I nodded. But even then, I think part of me already knew that if something went wrong, politeness would be the least of my concerns. The night of my birthday arrived cold and clear, the city glittering under winter lights. I wore a deep green dress that Cole said made my eyes look brighter. My hair was pinned up. My hands shook while I put on my earrings. He noticed immediately. "Nervous?" "A little. You don't owe anyone perfection tonight." I looked at him in the mirror. "I know. But what I didn't say was this. I still wanted it. Their approval, their pride, some small, impossible miracle where they looked at me and didn't see failure." When we arrived at the ballroom, everything was already glowing. Crystal chandeliers, white linen, gold-trimmed place settings, soft piano music curling through the room. It was beautiful in the way expensive things often are. Carefully designed to make people believe elegance and goodness are related. Guests turned as we entered. Coworkers from Cleveland Children's Services smiled and waved. Extended relatives approached with warm greetings. Cole's parents stood near the bar, dressed up and beaming with such uncomplicated affection that it nearly undid me. And then my mother crossed the room toward me with both arms open. "There she is," she said brightly, kissing my cheek. "Our birthday girl." "Our." Another word that should have felt strange. Instead, it made my chest tighten. Dad followed a moment later, impeccably dressed, one hand resting briefly on my shoulder. "You look beautiful, Danica." It was such a simple sentence, so ordinary. And from him, it felt almost unreal. For a few hours, the evening was everything I had secretly hoped it could be. The food was extraordinary. Prime rib, lobster tails, delicate salads plated like artwork. Champagne flowed. People laughed. My mother floated from table to table like the gracious hostess she had always trained herself to be. My father shook hands, told stories, even made a point of introducing Cole to several guests without once diminishing him. Victoria complimented my dress. Grant asked thoughtful questions about my work. At one point, I caught myself smiling without effort. Actually smiling. Maybe this is real, I thought. Maybe they finally chose me over their image. Maybe I was wrong. That was the most dangerous thought of the night. Because when the cake was rolled out, 3 tiers of dark chocolate with gold lettering spelling, "Happy 26th birthday, Danica," I was glowing with the kind of fragile happiness that only exists right before it is destroyed. Everyone gathered around. Phones lifted. Voices rose into a cheerful chorus of happy birthday. I looked around the room at my coworkers, Cole, his parents, the relatives I hadn't seen in years, my siblings, my parents standing side by side. And for one reckless, aching second, I believed I had my family back. Then my father lifted his glass and cleared his throat. "Before Danica blows out her candles," he said, his voice carrying cleanly through the ballroom, We have something important to share." The room quieted. I turned toward him, smiling at first, expecting a toast. Then I saw the envelope in his hand, and something cold moved through me. My mother stepped forward and took it from him with slow, deliberate care. "No, Danica," she said when I opened my mouth to ask what it was. "This can't wait." She unfolded the paper. The smile on her face disappeared. And suddenly, every light in that ballroom felt too bright. "This is difficult for us," my mother began. Her voice had changed. Gone was the warmth, the careful softness she had practiced for weeks. What remained was something colder, sharper, familiar. The kind of tone she used when she had already decided the outcome, and everyone else was simply there to witness it. The room fell completely silent. I could hear the faint hum of the chandeliers, the clink of a glass somewhere in the back, my own heartbeat. Too loud, too fast. And then she started reading. "To our daughter, Danica Sterling." For a split second, something inside me reached for hope. Maybe this was a speech, a formal apology, something ceremonial to mark a new beginning. "On this, your 26th birthday, we formally declare that you are no longer our daughter." The words didn't land all at once. They arrived in pieces, like glass, sharp and disjointed. And then they cut. A ripple of gasps moved through the crowd. Someone dropped a fork. Cole stepped closer behind me, his hand hovering just inches from my back, like he wasn't sure if touching me would steady me or shatter me completely. I couldn't move. My body had gone still in that strange, instinctive way it does when something is too big to process. My mother continued. "We have reached this decision after years of disappointment, defiance, and your repeated rejection of the values this family has upheld for generations." Each word was precise, measured, delivered like evidence in a courtroom. And suddenly, I wasn't standing at my birthday party anymore. I was 12 years old again, standing in the kitchen with a report card, waiting to be told I wasn't enough. "You have chosen a path beneath your potential," she read, her voice carrying effortlessly across the room. "Your career reflects a disregard for the education and opportunities we provided." I heard murmuring now, low, uneasy. My coworker Sarah shook her head, whispering something under her breath. Cole's mother covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes already filling with tears. But my mother didn't pause. She didn't look at me. She didn't hesitate. "Your choice of partner further demonstrates your unwillingness to uphold the standards of this family." That did it. I felt something crack inside me. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a clean, quiet break. Like something that had been strained for years, finally giving way. Cole's hand found mine then. Solid, warm, real. And for the first time since she started reading, I breathed. "We therefore declare, effective immediately," my mother continued, "that you are disinherited from our estate. You are no longer welcome at family gatherings, and we will no longer acknowledge you as our daughter." Silence. Then chaos. "What the hell is wrong with you?" someone shouted. Voices overlapped. Chairs scraped. A woman near the back hurried her children toward the exit. My supervisor looked like she might physically step forward to intervene, but my parents weren't finished. Of course they weren't. My father stepped forward, taking the paper from my mother's hands like he was resuming control of a case. "Furthermore," he said, his tone calm, authoritative, "your share of the inheritance will be redistributed to Victoria and Grant, our children who understand loyalty and respect." Our children. The distinction landed like a slap. My knees weakened. And this time, Cole didn't hesitate. His arm wrapped around my waist, steadying me before I could fall. "You okay?" he whispered. No, I wasn't. But something else was happening now. Something unexpected. The pain was still there. Sharp. Blinding. But underneath it, there was clarity. "You planned this," I said. My voice didn't shake. That surprised me. It sounded steady, cold, controlled. My mother finally looked at me, and for the first time that night, I saw something honest in her expression. Not regret, not doubt, satisfaction. "We needed to make it clear," she said, "for you and for everyone else." For everyone else, I repeated, letting out a small, humorless laugh. So you rented a ballroom, invited everyone I care about, and staged this like a performance? You forced our hand, my father said. You've spent years embarrassing this family. I embarrassed you? I stepped forward, pulling slightly away from Cole, needing to stand on my own. By helping children? By building a life that didn't revolve around your expectations? You chose mediocrity, my mother snapped. I chose humanity. The words came out before I could stop them, because something had shifted. The script they had written was no longer going the way they expected. You chose him, my father said, nodding toward Cole like he was referencing a bad investment. Over your own family. I turned fully then, placing my hand firmly in Cole's. I chose love, I said, over control. A murmur, I could feel it. The tide turning. You've proven exactly why I made that choice, I continued, my voice rising just enough to carry. Because no one who loves their child would do this. Not like this. Not here. My mother's jaw tightened. You're being dramatic. No, I said quietly. I'm being honest. I looked around the room then, at the faces of people who had watched me grow up, at my coworkers, at Cole's family, at strangers who had come expecting a celebration and instead found themselves witnessing something ugly and irreversible. This, I said, gesturing toward my parents, is what conditional love looks like. I saw my sister then, Victoria, standing near the edge of the crowd, arms crossed, a faint smile playing at her lips. Well, she said lightly, I think it's about time we stop pretending. Of course, she would say that. You're right, I nodded. We have been pretending. I turned back to the room, but not anymore. Grant stepped forward slightly, his face pale. Danica. Don't, I cut him off. My voice wasn't loud, but it was final. You sat there, I said, meeting his eyes, and let them do this. I didn't know. You didn't stop it. He flinched. And that was enough. I exhaled slowly. Then I straightened, fully. For the first time that night, I felt upright. Not physically, emotionally. Like something heavy had been taken off my shoulders. Thank you, I said, turning back to my parents. They blinked. Confused. Good. For this gift, I continued, because now everyone here sees exactly who you are. My mother's expression hardened. My father's lips pressed into a thin line. You've made it very clear, I went on, that your love was never about me. It was about control, about image, about whether I fit into the version of a daughter you wanted to present to the world. I paused. Let the silence stretch. You don't have to disown me, I said finally. Because after tonight, I don't have parents anymore. That landed hard. A few people gasped. Someone whispered, good for her. I looked at the cake then, still untouched, candles flickering, wax beginning to melt, and I realized something strange. I didn't want to blow them out anymore. I didn't want a wish. I didn't want anything from them. So I turned back to the room. Thank you all for coming, I said, my voice calm, almost polite. Please enjoy the food and drinks. I glanced once more at my parents. This is their farewell party, I added, not mine. And then I walked away. Cole was right beside me, his hand in mine, steady, certain. We didn't run. We didn't argue. We just left. Step by step, out of the ballroom, out of the illusion, out of the family that had just tried to destroy me, and in doing so, finally set me free. Outside, the cold air hit my face like a shock. I didn't realize I was shaking until Cole wrapped his arms around me. And then it came. Not quiet tears this time. Not controlled. I broke. Sobs tore out of me, raw and uncontrollable, as everything I had held together inside finally collapsed. It's okay, Cole murmured, holding me tighter. I've got you. Behind us, through the closed doors, I could still hear voices, raised, angry, disbelieving, the beginning of consequences. But I didn't look back, because for the first time in my life, there was nothing left there for me. Cole didn't let go of me the entire drive home. One hand stayed on the steering wheel. The other wrapped around mine, grounding me every time a fresh wave of emotion threatened to pull me under again. My phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Messages, calls, notifications piling on top of each other so fast it felt unreal. I didn't check them. Not yet. I just sat there, staring out at the blurred city lights, my reflection faint in the window. Smudged mascara, red eyes, a version of myself I didn't fully recognize. Not because I was broken, but because something fundamental had shifted. Something had ended. And something else, something quieter, stronger, had taken its place. They don't get to define you, Cole said softly as we stopped at a red light. I swallowed hard. They never did, I replied. And for the first time, I meant it. The fallout started before I even woke up the next morning. By the time I finally checked my phone, the story had already spread. Videos from the party, clips of my mother reading the letter, my father's voice, cold and precise, declaring me no longer their daughter. My response, my words, all of it. Shared, reposted, dissected. People weren't reacting the way my parents had expected. They weren't applauding tough love. They weren't praising discipline or family values. They were horrified, outraged, and overwhelmingly, they were on my side. Prominent attorney publicly disowns daughter for becoming a social worker. That was the headline circulating through Cleveland by noon. Screenshots flooded social media. Clips went viral locally. Someone even started a hashtag. Hashtag judge of character. A quiet, cutting jab at my father's profession. I sat on the edge of our bed, scrolling slowly, my chest tightening with every comment. Not from pain this time, from disbelief. They thought people would agree with them, I said. Cole leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. They thought they controlled the narrative, he replied. They forgot they don't control everyone. My father's world unraveled first. Reputation had always been his currency, and now it was slipping through his fingers. He wasn't fired, men like him rarely are, but clients started asking questions. Quiet ones at first, then more direct. How can we trust your judgment? If this is how you handle personal relationships. Requests came in to transfer cases to other partners. Billable hours dropped, and in his world, that meant everything. My mother's fall was faster, crueler, because hers had always been built on perception. Charity boards, gala invitations, carefully curated friendships with people who valued appearances as much as she did. And now, those same circles turned cold. One by one, she was removed, disinvited, excluded. The woman who once presided over fundraising events with effortless authority now found herself on the outside of the very society she had spent decades trying to impress. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, least of all me. Grant called me 3 days after the party. I stared at his name on my phone for a long time before answering. Hey, he said, his voice tight. Hey. Silence stretched between us. I didn't know they were going to do that, he said finally. I closed my eyes. It would have been easier if he had just said nothing. You didn't stop them, I replied. I couldn't. You could have stood up, I cut in. You could have said something, anything. I didn't want to make it worse. I let out a slow breath. You didn't want to make it worse for you, I corrected. He didn't argue, because he couldn't. They're getting destroyed out there, he said quietly. People at the hospital are talking. It's bad. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was inevitable. That's not my responsibility, I said. I know, he admitted. I wanted to say I'm sorry. The words hung there, heavy, late, not enough. I hear you, I said. But I didn't say I forgave him, because I didn't. Not then. Maybe not ever. Victoria didn't call. Of course she didn't. She sent a message instead. This is getting out of hand. You need to fix this. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I replied. I didn't start it. Her response came almost immediately. We're family. You don't destroy family like this. I felt something cold settle in my chest. You already did that, I typed. Then I blocked her. But while their world unraveled, mine began to rebuild itself in ways I hadn't expected. At work, something changed. Not in the way people treated me with pity, but in the way they stood beside me. My coworkers, people who had witnessed everything, became something stronger than colleagues. They became protectors, friends, family. Parents of kids I had helped sent messages, cards, flowers. One woman wrote, "You helped my son when no one else would. That matters more than anything your parents said." I cried reading that because it reminded me of something I had almost lost sight of. Why I chose this life in the first place. And Cole never once asked me to be anything other than what I was. 6 months later, he proposed. Not in a grand public way, not with an audience, but in his workshop. The smell of wood and varnish in the air, a half-finished table behind him. "I don't want to replace your family," he said, his voice steady but emotional. "I want to build one with you." Tears filled my eyes. "The kind that chooses each other," he added, "every day." "Yes," I whispered. "Yes." Our wedding was small, intentional, real. Aunt Dorothy, who had called me the morning after the party, furious and unwavering, walked me down the aisle. "I'm your family now," she had told me. "The kind that doesn't disappear when things get uncomfortable." Cole's mother, Linda, held my hands during the reception. "I'm so proud to call you my daughter," she said. And for the first time in my life, that word didn't feel conditional. Years passed. Not quickly, but steadily. My work grew, expanded. I eventually founded a nonprofit, helping foster children find stable, permanent homes, the kind of stability I had spent my life searching for. Cole and I built something real, something quiet, something strong. We had 2 children, and I made a promise the moment I held each of them in my arms. They would never have to earn my love. I heard about my parents through Dorothy, never directly, never from them. My father suffered a heart attack 3 years after that night. Stress-related, the doctors said. When he woke up in the hospital, it was just my mother there. Grant was busy. Victoria had commitments. The family they had protected so fiercely wasn't there. My mother changed too. Or maybe she just became more visible without the armor of status around her. Anxiety, depression, isolation. The woman who once orchestrated every room she entered now sat alone at lunch tables that used to be reserved for her. 5 years after the party, I saw her in a grocery store, of all places. She looked smaller, not physically, but diminished, like someone who had spent too long living without something essential. She saw me, froze. Her eyes moved to my hand, my wedding ring, then to the stroller beside me. "Danica," she said softly. My name sounded unfamiliar in her voice, like something she no longer had the right to say. I looked at her, really looked, and for a moment I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just distance. Then I walked past her, without a word, leaving her standing there in the cereal aisle. People ask me sometimes if I regret it, if I wish I had forgiven them, if I think family should always come first. But they don't understand something. I didn't lose my family that night. I lost the illusion of one. And in its place, I built something real. I still have the letter, not because it hurts, but because it reminds me. It sits in a drawer beside my social work license, my wedding photos, and my children's birth certificates. Proof that sometimes the greatest gift you can receive is being set free by the people who never deserved you in the first place.